Okay. Okay, everybody. Good evening. So the study session for the Board of Education for April 20th, 2015 is called to order. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone present and to our television viewers. While our study sessions are generally limited to receipt of information from staff and discussion of that information and review of resolutions prior to a vote, at times we do conduct votes during study sessions. Any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times, and the board meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV Services website. Student Representative J.S. Wall is absent this evening. So we're going to start out with public comment, and Ms. Houston, could you call up the first two folks?
Sure. Scott Bailey and Angela Jarvis Holland.
If Scott hasn't joined us yet, maybe call the next person.
Stephanie Hunter.
Great. And you all have been here before, so you know the routine, and it's the 3 minutes. And when the red light goes off, we respectfully ask you to wrap up your comments in, but we really appreciate you being here and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Well, good evening, and my name's Angela Jarvis Holland. I am the Executive Director of the Northwest Down Syndrome Association and the All Born In movement, but I'm also a parent of 2 children, one who's gone through Portland Public Schools and is now at PCC, and my son Daniel, who is at Benson and also wants to go to PCC. So I just have been thinking about this. Somebody that's British that's to blame for the word normal. We didn't even have the idea of a norm until a machine was invented that created a bell curve. And I think that if we start adding up the children we have in special education, the children on 504 plans, the ELL children, the TAG kids, those with mental health needs, children of colour, then teaching for the middle of that bell curve, we know, really doesn't make sense or produce good results. All our children have the same dreams, and this girl here is a good friend of Daniel's and attends Grant High School, and she wants to go to Portland Community College. So I'm here representing the idea that every child deserves the same opportunities, and that I think we are making a mistake if we start querying and putting special education on the line to justify and explain a move towards best practices that work. The movement that I've been part of for 10 years consistently brings examples and folks to this city who are doing work that really produce good results and that we need to learn from. We've had many good teachers amongst the mix with Daniel. We have an incredible partnership growing with Portland Public Schools. But my biggest request is that we stop asking special ed to explain the moral, human, and civil rights of children to be educated properly and equitably in our systems, and all get busy on the hard work that requires. And I would like to offer that I'm a resource, and there are many other good resources and people that really want to partner, and that's the only way you will have the capacity to do the work in partnership. And we're ready, and we need you to be ready with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello, Superintendent Smith and Board Directors. My name is Stephanie Hunter. Do I have to spell it still? H-U-N-T-E-R? I don't remember if I got those instructions. I'm a parent of a 6th grader on the Ockley Green campus of CJOG, the president of the Special Education PTA, and a member of the Portland Parent Union. I'm also going to speak from my knowledge base as a positive behavior support specialist. I support the Special Education Department's REACH 2020 plan. I want to speak specifically about kindergarten inclusion and closing the behavior classrooms. Kindergarten inclusion with support is the right thing to do and rooted in common sense and best practices. Most of us would also agree that putting a child in a place called the behavior classroom is a path that does not usually lead to graduation or returning to mainstream classes. The path is more likely to lead to further isolation, loneliness, unemployment, and contact with the justice system. In an audit done of PPS Special Education, the auditor Richard Tracy wrote, "Recent studies demonstrate that more involvement of special education students in the general education environments can help improve their achievement and control the growth of costly, separate, self-contained classrooms." While we know it is the right and most cost-effective path, it is also true that some students may need significant support. The issue most likely to impact a child's success in the general education environment is challenging behavior. Positive behavior interventions and support, or PBIS, is the key here, but it has an image problem. I've talked to way too many educators and administrators that have no faith in PBIS and see it only as a system of reward and punishment. School-wide PBIS, for the largest percentage of the triangle, is working great. Those kids learn the rules, they earn the rewards, and understand the first time they are in trouble not to do it again. For the students in the middle and the top of the triangle, enhanced supports are needed to learn the same skills. These enhanced supports may include assistive technology, universal design, structure and visual supports, trauma-informed support, and co-teaching, to name a few. Another support that should be provided is called a Functional Behavioral Assessment, or FBA, and Behavior Support Plan, or BSP. The FBA is an assessment tool that identifies the big picture of the challenging behavior, what reinforces it, and what skill the child and educators can learn to replace the behavior with a skill. The BSP is then the individualized instruction manual for how to teach these new skills and includes a safety plan. Historically, if an FBA is done at all, it is too late and at the point that a child is already being placed into a restrictive classroom placement. The wonderful tool that an FBA could ultimately be becomes a weapon to remove a child from a setting. I have talked to the fantastic staff in PPS with knowledge of FBA and BSP, figure out what the barriers are and let them do their good work. A student with behavior challenges should not have to wait years to get an FBA. Almost done. A teacher needs these tools proactively and not in crisis. PBIS and restorative justice implemented in tandem is my personal dream come true and is in fact currently being piloted in Lane County. PBIS brings the science and values of increasing skills and quality of life, and RJ brings the focus on strong relationships, community, and healing through understanding and accountability. You have the people, partners, and parents right now to get this done. The kids are in crisis right now and cannot wait for whatever mess the adults have going on getting in the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next two speakers, Whitney Howell and Jenna Ostrand.
Welcome.
Thanks. You want to go first? Sure. So neither one of us have ever been here before. We're aware we've got 3 minutes.
Right, and just go ahead and start by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record.
Okay.
And then, yeah, the yellow light goes on when you've got 1 minute left. And when the red light goes off, that's the 3 minutes, and we just ask that you wrap up as soon as possible.
Okay, cool.
Thanks so much.
I'm Jenna Ostrand, O-S-T-R-A-N-D. I'm new to Portland Public Schools. I have a son who is in kindergarten at Brigler Elementary. He is in the only English-speaking class at the school, and I believe that has probably a little bit of why I'm here, because there is only one English-speaking class. In the classroom, there are extremely unsafe behaviors going on out of 25 children, between 10 and 12 children have some sort of mental needs, behavioral needs, and there's nobody in there to assist them. There's one teacher with these 25 kids, with a lot of them that have a lot of different issues. There's kids being chased around the classroom with scissors on a regular basis. There's children getting bloody nose from things being thrown around in the classroom, whether it's a pear or it's a chair. They've had to go have emergency recesses on a few different occasions because the teacher has called up to the office to ask for assistance because children are running around, they're throwing things, screaming, whatever it may be. They call up to the office, they say they send somebody down. It takes 20 minutes, nobody's down. They call again, nobody comes down, so they've had to go outside. And what is one teacher to do with 25 kids when 3 kids are running around doing this and nobody's coming down to help the teacher? There's been children that have exposed their private parts to other children in the midst of the class. And just the time frame that it takes from somebody to come down to assist the children makes me nervous to leave my child at school. As a result of all of this, their teacher has decided as of a week ago to take basically a 2-month leave of absence, leaving 25 kindergarten students without the only thing that's regular to them in their classroom. So now for me to take my son and leave him at school, I feel nervous. I don't feel like he's safe. I don't know who's there to advocate for him. This new person that's coming in, they just hired a new person to be there regularly if they decide to stick with the position. I've had to pull my kid out of class because I don't feel safe with him being at school. I'm a parent. I'm not anything but that. I don't know what the solution is, but the solution for me right now as a parent is to take my kid out of school until I feel like he's safe.
Thank you. And one thing
I think
sorry.
that's all. Go ahead.
Oh, were you done?
Yeah.
I was just going to say one thing I didn't say in the introduction is that to make sure you connect with Roseanne Powell, our board manager over there, for any follow-up she can, so connect with her after your meeting.
Cool,
So thank you very
thanks.
much. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Whitney Howell, Howell. I'll tell you my main concern here, and it is to have a second class for the English only in every grade of the immersion program. Our sons are in the same classroom with Matt Furrow. 3 weeks ago, I had one of the students in my son's classroom come over to my house, and he's actually one of our neighbors, but he is exposed to a lot of things that my children are not, and he convinced my son to put his penis in his mouth. And when I brought this up to the administration at his school, they wrote up a safety plan, and I emphasize on this because they need to move to a different table from each other. One will stand in the front of the line, the other will stand in the back of the line, and they won't go to the bathroom with each other. And that was the only safety plan for my son. DHS has been involved with the situation. I was informed that it's probably best for my son to go into counseling because of what has happened, because of the traumatization, and the other families being investigated. I just don't feel like that is something that is really saving my son. I mean, what if they were outside and they went into the bush and the kid decided to try and get my son to do that again? Would that make you guys feel comfortable with your children? I don't think so. I have now transferred my son out of the school because they have not provided any kind of protection for my child. And I feel like if there was a second English only class, that could really alleviate a lot of problems. There is a cousin, and there's two cousins in Matt's class, Mr. Matt's class. They should not be in a classroom together at all whatsoever. They are two of the most disruptive children in that classroom. And if there was a second option where they could be separated, that would alleviate one problem out of the many that Matt has to go through every single day. I'm gonna give an example of something real fast. Friday afternoon, I was there from 12 to 2:15. Within this hour and 45 minutes, there was 4 children that were being insanely disruptive in that amount of time. One student was screaming and yelling and wouldn't do anything. He was, Judy Scott, who takes over for the principal there when she's gone, came down, assisted for a second, he calmed down, she left. After she left, he decided that he was gonna take pencils and start swinging them in the air like this while children were walking around. I ended up taking the pencils out of his hand, putting them in the pencil box. He threatened to take all of the pencils out of the pencil box and start swinging them at the other children. So I grabbed all of the pencil boxes, took them away. He ended up bombarding himself in the corner of the classroom with a play kitchen and taking a shelf out of the bookshelf to keep himself from there. He said that he was gonna start pulling out the staples out of the wall and poking children with it. That's one example of that afternoon. Another example is there's a child who just transferred in.
Sorry, please wrap it up, and then
Okay.
I would encourage you to follow up.
They
Roseanne
transferred
Powell.
in a child, I don't know exactly where, Somali, had no English. The only English he did know was oh shit and fuck no. That was repeated daily, all day long in the classroom of my children, for my child. And he stands on top of the tables, he stands on top of the chairs, he stands on the wet countertop and runs around and throws chairs and knocks people's stuff off. That is one of the most extreme that we have. The other two that are very, very disruptive, and these are just a list from what she has, these two girls.
I'm sorry, if you could just wrap up, you
Fine.
could also feel free
Okay.
to send us to
That's
us in
fine.
writing, and then also follow up with our board manager, please, so she
Okay,
can.
that's fine. You guys got a good gist of what's going on. And this is daily, and I'm there every day from 12:30 to 2:15. There needs to be more support, and there needs to be a second English only class.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in. And the next two.
Yes, our last speaker is Marty Pavlik.
And then, I don't know if Scott Bailey has arrived. who was on the list for earlier? Okay, just checking. Hold on a second. Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Marty Pavlik, P-A-V-L-I-K. I live in the Wilson cluster, and I'm also a staff person for PAT. And I'd like to talk to you about safety. Right now, we are seeing a dramatic increase in assaults and battery upon staff members. I believe the reason is a perfect storm of events, including special ed redesign, the superintendent's priority to reduce exclusionary discipline, and a change in state law around restraining students. Tonight, we have heard from two regular parents who spoke to you about safety concerns in their child's kindergarten classroom. Unfortunately, this problem is widespread and is a direct result of changes made by the special ed department. Woodlawn kindergarten teacher Aubrey Pagenstecker spoke to you over this issue several weeks ago. Several other special ed teachers have shared that the continuum of special ed services is seriously eroded. Students are being placed in general ed classrooms without training of the general ed teachers in advance and without providing sufficient resources to keep all the students safe. After these presentations, district administration offered to intervene. PAT gave the district the two most serious cases that we were aware of, the kindergarten teachers class at Rigler and another class at Vernon. Unfortunately, no significant interventions were enacted. Both teachers filed workload requests asking for safety plans, etc., and more support in their classrooms, and no support was provided. The Rigler teacher is now on stress-related leave, and the Vernon teacher has suffered a concussion after once again being assaulted by students. Students hitting, kicking, biting, shoving, and spitting upon teachers is sadly becoming commonplace. At our level at PAT, we see a concentration of cases in K-3 settings, and most are concentrated in North and Northeast Portland. The PAT-PPS contract and the board-approved policy on student rights and responsibility includes specific procedures and consequences for students who assault and or abandon teachers. These policies and agreements are being systematically ignored. Why? I believe this is a direct result of pressure on principals to reduce exclusionary discipline to comply with the superintendent's priority. This is now included in the administrator's evaluation. The simplest solution, referrals have been lost, ignored, or rejected. Members have reported from buildings all over the district that they were told not to refer kids anymore. Some members have reported that referrals into Synergy were removed. Others have been told by an administrator that he could not accept any more referrals because he has met his quota for the month. In short, disciplinary referrals may be down, but this does not mean that discipline has improved or is being handled through other effective strategies. In more and more classrooms and in more schools, teachers and kids are unsafe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, in addition to time and public comment, we have through our contract with the Portland Association of Teachers.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
Before we go on, there was, there was somebody who wanted to testify but said we were all filled up. I noticed we only had 5. And we
Scott Bailey was on the list, and I called twice, and I didn't see him here. So, I was just about to call down Suzanne. So.
Okay, well, so can we have the person who came fill that spot?
There was another person waiting to testify.
I don't have one. No.
She's in the audience right there.
You know what? I'd like to just keep going with the agenda here because we've got Suzanne Cohen waiting, and we need to stick with how we have it. So, all right.
So maybe she could do it afterwards. I mean, we have 6 spots, and the person said that they couldn't testify because we were full, and we're not full. So I'd like to give that opportunity.
Great. Let's go ahead and.
We asked and were told if you didn't put that request in and get a name down and know somebody wasn't speaking, that you couldn't speak. So Daniel was going to speak, and I didn't prepare to speak.
Yeah. We need to go with the sign-ups in advance, and if someone doesn't show up, that's unfortunate. There's an opportunity the next time. Okay, let's move along now. So, contract with the Portland Association of Teachers allows some time on our agenda, so we're welcoming Suzanne Cohen, who's Vice President of PAT, down to the table to offer some comments. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you very much. I want to be absolutely clear, and the Portland Association of Teachers is completely supportive of more inclusion for students with special needs. But You cannot take away past supports like paraeducators, placement settings, such as behavior classrooms, without first implementing training and staffing for new models. The safety issues in kindergarten classrooms were perfectly predictable, and when we brought this up to administration in the fall, we were told that the district was going to go ahead and be sued no matter what, and that many students would ultimately succeed in a gen ed setting. The district essentially chose to ignore the safety problems as a part of a moral imperative. This can and should be implemented in a more thoughtful way. The Portland Association of Teachers is also supportive of strategies to reduce exclusionary discipline, including strategies to reduce disproportionate discipline for students of color, boys, and special education students. Systems like restorative justice and PBIS take significant training and work to educate staff, students, and parents on how to successfully use these strategies. And this work should be done before dismantling discipline policies currently in place. So the Portland Association of Teachers is asking you, the elected school board, to direct the superintendent to do the following things. 1, promptly intervene when safety risks are noted, especially in kindergarten classrooms. 2, review the kindergarten transition process this school year and develop a proactive solutions not to repeat the problems next year. 3, review what's really happening with discipline referrals. 4, stop violating our own PPS board policy in the Students' Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, our own joint contract, by allowing teachers to be assaulted and/or battered without following the procedures identified and the consequences outlined in those documents. 5, please work with PAT, building principals, and parents to implement training and support to help students succeed in the general ed classrooms before closing other placement options. And finally, 6, work with us, the Portland Association of Teachers, other staff unions, principals, and parents to make sure that every staff person and every student can safely go to school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so first item on the agenda following comment from public and partners is our Employee Service Award. So we had an amazing list of folks who have served long years in the district. So Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item?
I would. So tonight's board book contains our 214-15 list of 849 PPS. Is this echoey?
Yeah.
It's echoey.
It is, yeah.
849 PPS employees who are celebrating a 5-year incremental service milestone this year. The full list is available on the PPS benefit website. The average years of PPS service in this group is 13 years of service, with a whopping 11,250 total years of service from this group of folks. There are 14 35-year service award recipients this year. They are bus driver Douglas Fleming, teachers Cynthia Wojak, Daryl Moore, Carrie Locke, Lisa Losky, Richard Ryer, and Laura Jackson, Human Resources Director Frank Scotto, Principals John Walden and Pam Joyner, Para-Educator Joy Rosie, Custodians Edward Bourne and Lonnie Fleming, and Community Agent John Poon. So we send out a congratulations to each one of those folks, as well as they get a year of a service pin that honors the 5-year incremental years of service. And every year, it is wonderful to see how many people are with Portland Public Schools throughout their entire career. And again, please join me in just congratulating and thanking this group of people for their years of service.
Wow. Wonderful, thank you so much. So next on our agenda is a presentation around the foster site agreement with NAEA, but before we hear this item, I'd like to give Director Morton the opportunity, bless you, to say a few words about this.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to say a few words regarding my relationship to the Native American Youth and Family Center and my service on the Board of Directors here at PPS. And I'm going to do that in reading a memo that I provided each of the last 3 years to, as board chairs revolve. as well as to the chair and board of the NAIA Family Center. The first one was dated November 14th, 2012. Dear co-chairs, as you are aware, I recently accepted the position of Executive Director for the Native American Youth and Family Center, or NAIA, in Portland, Oregon. NAIA is a 501c3 organization and has served self-identified Native American youth and families in the Portland area for nearly 40 years. We work very hard to enrich the lives of our youth and families through education, community involvement, and culturally specific programming. Educational services, cultural arts programming, and direct support to reduce poverty are among the programs we offer. You are also aware that in May 2012, the City of Portland, PPS, and NAIA entered into discussions regarding the development of a multi-generational housing and early learning education program at the former Foster Elementary site at 5205 Southeast 86th Avenue. The aim of this project is to give Native children, particularly those in the foster system, stable housing and a solid, successful start in school. As a director of the Board of Education for Portland Public Schools and the former Deputy Executive Director of the NAIA Family Center, I have taken extensive precautions to avoid any real or perceived conflicts of interest. For example, I have consistently recused myself from business agenda votes that would directly impact and or benefit NAIA. However, with my new role at NAIA and the inevitable progress of the joint partnership I described above, I feel it's critical for me to further distance myself from this project. I have discussed this with the Board of Directors at NAIA, and I believe the following actions will create an appropriate and needed separation. 1, as previously stated, I will recuse myself from any votes that directly impact NAIA. 2, I have requested that all emails and other correspondence regarding this project are not sent to me, either as a NAIA staff person or a PPS board member. 3, under the authority of the NAIA Board of Directors, Joe Delaney, Board Chair, will assume the decision-making responsibility of this project, and Ray Espana, Director of Community Development at NAIA, will be the staff point of contact and will be directly supervised by Chair Delaney for any issues and or performance related to this project. I am, excuse me, I am honored to serve our community in multiple capacities, and I take that responsibility very seriously. Although I cannot be a part of this project, I feel it may have the potential of serving as an example of how nonprofit organizations and public entities can work together to ensure high impact on persistent community need. If you have any questions or recommendations of other steps I should take to separate myself from this project, please don't hesitate to contact either myself or Chair Delaney, who is CC'd to this email. Respectfully, Matt Morton, CC'd Joe Delaney and Ray Espana. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So now, Superintendent Smith, would you like to introduce this item?
I would, and as you have heard over the last 3 years, PPS has been developing an exciting partnership with NAIA around the development of generations on the Foster site. The development will consist of intergenerational housing, a regional early learning academy, and the Generations Longhouse. Tonight we're moving forward with some of the next steps, and I'm going to ask Sarah King, who's our Director of Planning and Asset Management, and Ray Espana, who's the Deputy Director of NAIA, as well as Joe Delaney, the NAIA Board Chair, to make our presentation tonight. So over to you, Sarah.
Unfortunately, is this on? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, Mr. Delaney will not be able to join us this evening. He was called away unexpectedly. Good evening, Board of Education and Superintendent Smith. We're presenting information this evening regarding facilities-related actions necessary to continue the progress on the NAIA Generations intergenerational housing and the adjacent regional early learning academy and Longhouse Community Center.
Wait to the end for questions.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We will have 3 actions before you on April 28th, 2015. The first 2 actions are necessary to allow the affordable intergenerational housing to move forward. The second is necessary to move the Regional Early Learning Academy and Longhouse Community Center into the the pre-design phase of the school facility. The 3 actions are a ground lease amendment, an amendment to the ground lease that was signed in April of 2013, property dedication and a local improvement district petition approval to develop required public street improvements on the site, and a pre-development agreement with NAIA. I would like to now turn it over to Mr. Espana to talk about the genesis of the project and the status, as well as the synergy between the intergenerational housing and the Early Learning Academy in Longhouse.
Thank you, Chair Atkins, Directors, Superintendent Smith. It's always a blessing to be in front of you, and tonight is no exception. So I'm really pleased to be here and to kind of give you a status report, kind of give you some background information, and as Sarah outlined, move us along the process of the next steps. As Mr. Morton outlined, we've been very careful with his situation as being a sitting board member. As the Deputy Executive Director, I was the lead on the project, reporting directly to Joe on the issues of development of the intergenerational housing as we move forward with the Early Learning Academy. I was directly involved in 2012 in negotiating the original MOU with Bob Alexander between the city, NEA, and PPS at that time, and that set in motion back then how we would come together and move the project along. And so it's always as I say, a pleasure to be here. As outlined, this project is kind of a master plan development of the former Foster Elementary site. There's essentially two specific phases to the project. The first is an intergenerational housing component. The intergenerational housing is 40 units of housing, 30 of which of those units will be primarily or designated for seniors or elders in the community who act as mentors to the children. The other 10 units are classified as family development units, and they're specifically provided to individuals who would like to have permanent adoption of children out of the foster care system. Just a little bit of some background on, let's say, the state of Native children in foster care. In Multnomah County, Native children, more than 1 in 5, 21%, make up the population of foster care children. Additionally, Native children are overrepresented in foster care child welfare systems across the nation, but none more than Multnomah County directly. Native children experience at a rate of 137% stays in foster care of over 4 years compared to white children. A second group with significant numbers of children participating disproportionately in the foster care system is the African American children, and together we make up of over 42% of children in foster care in Multnomah County. I give you this context of why this project is so important to the Native community and to NEA specifically. We've long advocated for reform and change in the child welfare system, the foster care specifically. The rate of our children showing up in foster care is disproportionately high compared to our rate in the general population. You know, 7, 8, how many, 10 times, how many percentage do you want me to dictate? All I'm trying to say is there's been a concern in our community around this situation, and therefore this project offers hope. It offers a way, a path, a good path for children to exit foster care, to find parents, individuals who are willing to adopt and create permanency for these children, and therefore that alone is a valuable project to not only to our community and to the children that will benefit, but we hope to demonstrate to the state officials and anyone else that would like to see, I believe, an effort on behalf of our community in partnership with Portland Public Schools to demonstrate a successful project that can mean meaningful success for our children, which is all our primary goals, as well as providing opportunities for our elders in the community to find some meaningful purpose late in life. And we've patterned our project after the very, very positive Bridge Meadows program in North Portland. And so I do want to recognize their contribution. I think we would become, I believe, the 3rd or 4th site in the nation kind of promoting the same intergenerational housing project. And we owe a lot to Dorinda and the folks at Bridge Meadows. Phase 1 is the housing portion. some of the actions that will be taking place tonight or in the next few weeks will allow us to move forward with the housing phase one of the project. We would like to break ground or start construction at the end of summer. To get there, we need to put a number of things in place. Once before, maybe maybe a couple years now, we came before you with a lease on a portion of the property to develop the housing. In meeting with community members and further planning, suggested that it would probably have the project work better if we kind of flipped the school or the Learning Academy with the housing. Therefore, it would require a technical adjustment to flip-flop the location of the housing placement in relation to the existing facility. So that's one of the matters that are before you. The City of Portland, which was another signer to that agreement, has taken action to approve the technical adjustment in that phase. So we're now getting ready to then, we have the sites flip-flopped. We will be providing information that would support the demolition of the existing facility as a part of this action. And as I mentioned earlier, to break ground, start construction on the housing phase late summer, August, early September. We project approximately an 11-month construction period, and so we would be leasing up and having families and residents a year after construction starts. Phase 2 of the project is what is being referenced as the Regional Early Learning Academy and Longhouse. And this, I want to say and commend the board, Superintendent Smith, Harriet, and all the staff who have worked with us to kind of develop the idea. And I think it's a very unique partnership between a community organization. Here's Mrs. Harriet just mentioned you. I want to thank personally Harriet and the staff who have demonstrated nothing but goodwill in coming together and advancing a very unique partnership with Portland Public Schools, and that is to dedicate and to look at this site as a learning community where we will focus on Indigenous learning, ways of learning, our vision, our values, our cultural knowledge of learning, our practices will be integrated into that site, and we're very excited about working with Harriet and staff to bring this to fruition. It's going to be unique as we implement that project. We're anticipating phase 2 to occur the early fall of 2016, I'm sorry. That's when we think we would break ground, and there's a lot of work to do, like raise money and get that started. But that's the schedule. Phase 1, end of summer. Phase 2, the early learning, about a year, 11, 12 months after that, early fall of 2016. We think that it's tough to say right now with the state of construction, but we think 11 or 12 month period would be sufficient to get the project done. As you may know, the construction industry is very alive and electric, a lot of stuff going on to their credit. I'll just say that another important feature to the project was our involvement, PPS's involvement in the Generation Project, as it was designated an Oregon Solutions Project by the former Governor Kitzhaber. We went through approximately 6-month process of engagement, of a broad community engagement to introduce the project to the community. Had many of interested stakeholders in attendance to that process, and that culminated with a signing event that occurred at the Foster Elementary School in a hot summer day. It was beautiful. Last, I believe it was July, and I think we had over 25 signatories to that agreement. And that agreement, while not binding, non-binding, really demonstrate goodwill to support in a collaborative way the completion and implementation and hopefully the operation of the programs at the site. And so we look forward to continuing our good work being led by PPS and ourselves and other stakeholders as we begin to look at the next phase, and that is the programming phase of the school, of the cultural center. We will have kind of a complete wraparound social services to support the adults or parents of the children who live there, as well as the community, in a lot of what I would call self-sufficiency, financial literacy, jobs, training programs, things of that nature. There may be interest in microenterprise, so a complete wraparound of relevant community economic development services. We've also secured an agreement in principle with our sister organization, NARA, to provide health access services at that site. And what we envision there is a health access site, a very small operation that will, I guess, launch a very good start to children's medical health histories. And we think that we can do that and get them ready for school and then have them follow. I think we're doing a good service for the children as well as the parents. I've committed to Harriet to sustain our social services at least until the 3rd grade for all the children that go through the site there. As we see, the site has 8 classrooms, of 2 of which are daycare extended early toddler. We call it Chison at our organization, but it's very toddler parent active activity with their child. We have 3 classes dedicated to Head Start and 3 kindergarten classes designated in that location. The Longhouse is the gateway to the site. That is the front door, if you will, and that is going to be where it'll be a community center, a meeting center, a kitchen, an operational kitchen, and have our health access on the, I guess it's the mezzanine or second floor of the building, and our social services will be out of that location as well. The very center circle there is the center and the heart of the project. It will be used to gather. We're envisioning maybe somewhat of an amphitheater, but it's going to be, from a design point of view, a gathering and meeting place for the community as well as those that like to seek the access to the site. What else can I tell you? We're right now on phase 1 looking at a construction budget, but I think we're getting very close to looking at whether we can certainly afford this. We've raised over $10 million to launch this phase of the project, and so we feel very, very comfortable. We're at that, though, design and value engineering phase of that project.
It's the housing.
The housing, yes, phase 1. What else can I tell you? We've had 2 or 3 meetings with the community to listen to their concerns. The primary concern that a number of local residents and neighbors, I can point to where they live, has been the fact that this site is going to be coming to life. It has been relatively dormant for a number of years, and so they had no traffic come through their neighborhood. When they heard of this project, they envisioned lots of traffic, and that has been the primary concern of the neighbors. Once they had a chance to, in our community meetings, to understand what we're going to do there, many of them can become very supportive and advocates and took advantage of visiting Bridge Meadows to see it in operation. And so we feel we're very comfortable with the general community sentiment towards NEA, and specifically in the implementation phase of this project. I think we'll demonstrate broad support. I'm relatively sure, though, that those who would like to see no traffic and no cars or buses in their neighborhood would still have a concern. But what we were able to do is on our northern border, which is toward the top of the screen, we committed to build a street for the site to provide the connectivity, the pass-through around our site. That connectivity allows us then to bring the buses in one way and have a drop-off. Without that connectivity, that northwest corner, we cannot do that with the buses. So from a standpoint of picking up and delivering children, we needed to build a street, and we're committed to doing that, and that is part of the LID process. We'll be responsible for as well as building the street, but also along the eastern border, finishing the street that goes down to Inslee there will be no car thoroughfares except for that parking lot, but we'll be able to pedestrian bikes to kind of go through that egress area there. Just a matter of fact, the housing phase of the project could be sited by right. There are no land use or planning issues with that activity, but the development or re-engagement of a school would require a conditional use permit process. And what we decided to do is to take this project and do a level 3 planning and use, conditional use process, extensive review, because we want the project to be understood as it is an integrated project involving the phase 2 and phase 1, housing and education together. And we've decided that we'll be filing our application the first week in May for the conditional use hearing. I think I'll just stop unless you have any particular issues, Sarah, you want me to cover, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on the project.
Great, thank you both very much. So, questions?
Excuse,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me finish a few more items
sorry,
for you.
I'm sorry.
I wanted to specifically talk about the actions that are before you, and Mr. Espana mentioned the street. That's this right here and this here, as you know from your staff report. That this is a required public improvement that is required for the housing that's going in on the site. It's also required for the new development of the Early Learning Academy. And actually, that's the Greece public street improvement. We've talked about the ground lease. So we're required to both dedicate property for this street, and we're required also to build the street. But we have decided jointly to work with the city on a creation of a local improvement district that will take your permission to formally petition the city for the local improvement district. Local improvement districts is one way to build and finance public improvements. In this case, instead of having NAIA or the Portland Public Schools build the street and pay for it as the housing is going in, the local improvement district actually allows a mechanism whereby the city builds the street, and then when the city is done building the street, they will go ahead and bill. In this case, they'll bill assess Portland Public Schools because we own the greater tract, and we have the option of paying that up front or paying that in installments or financing it over 20 years. We have a cost-sharing agreement that's part of the pre-development agreement with NAIA that shares in the cost of improving these street improvements. That's because NAIA's housing site here takes up about 55% of the site. The Early Learning Academy is 45% of the site. So we'll have a cost-sharing agreement for the street improvements that we will be assessed through this local improvement district. And also the cost of that local improvement district will be decided by the City Council in May. We are also part of this. We are one of the parties to this local improvement district. There's a neighboring property that is party to this as well, and the City Council will make the final determination about the cost allocation between the two parties. And lastly, I wanted to update or talk about a few things in the pre-development agreement. I want to emphasize that these agreements are really about facilities, not about program. We've talked a little bit about program. There's still some more work to do about program. In general, we think we're going to be able to serve about 120 to 150 kids at the Regional Early Learning Academy. But I want to emphasize that the agreements before you are really about building the facilities necessary for that program. And the pre-development agreement is a binding agreement. It's really about pre-development. Even though we've talked here about preliminary construction costs, how much we think this facility will cost, that's not what's going to be before you. What is before you is the pre-development agreement, which talks about who's going to own the building, who's going to manage what portions of the building, what is the general program going to be. How are we sharing the design costs? We've gone through a conceptual design process right now. There's a lot more design that needs to do. And with the approval of the pre-development agreement, we will then enter into a contract with an architect to begin design in earnest. We have a cost-sharing agreement as part of this development agreement with NAIA to share the cost of that design work. One thing I'd like to offer to you is, as we go through these design phases and we continue to do cost estimates on this building, we will bring that information back to you, probably in written information, or we can come and make a presentation. But I think it's important as we go through the design to let you know where we are in terms of cost estimating for this building. And then Later on in the year, we will come before you with a development agreement similar to what we approved just 2 months ago with Fabian that will talk specifically about the cost of the building, how the costs will be shared, and more formal agreements about the actual construction of the project. I think I'll leave it at that, and we'll see if you've got questions.
All right. Questions from board members? Director Buell.
I'm kind of confused about our relationship with NAIA. It seems to me that we, could you explain what it is? Sir, what's our relationship to NAIA with the school district? We're giving you a good deal of money to some, we're getting some things out of it, but when I've tried to work with NAIA, I've been shut down entirely in trying to get NAIA to suggest and help us working with Native American kids in our school system, so I'm kind of confused. Is there a two-way thing going, or is this just a one-way where we just give you the money?
Is that for me?
I guess.
Okay. We'll certainly take the money, but that's not why I'm here. I think our relationship with PPS is long-standing. We have existing contracts. We have staff that visit 40 to 50 schools currently to work with Native children. I'm sure we can always do more, but you and I have not really talked about this, and I'd be happy to discuss this with you if you feel there's a need for us to be more active, or there are certain schools that we need to get to.
Maybe you could send me information about what you're actually doing in the schools.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I'd like to see that because I haven't seen much of that. I'm just not aware of what's taking place, and I know when I've made overtures, they've just been shut down. Okay. They just know, for various different reasons, I guess. I've never understood it entirely.
Okay, well, myself, I'd be happy to address that with you. Let me just say that NAIA has over 40 years in this community. And
yeah, wonderful organization. I
just want to let you know what we're doing with children specifically, and that is the parents and the community folks that originally wanted to organize in the community on a volunteer basis did that to promote cultural awareness, cultural preservation, and doing well in school and staying out of trouble. That was the original organizing philosophy. For over 20 years, it remained a voluntary organization. There was no staff, there was no organization. And to this day, we still operate our sports program on a completely voluntary basis. So we've established rapport with our community. We've worked with children. It was in 1995 that we decided, through a concern that NAIA needed to do more for our children and our families. And that's when we filed for our incorporation and became a 501(c) or a typical nonprofit organization, and received our first contract. Our first contract was then back at a student attendance initiative that was promoted by the county and PPS, and that is to make contact with students who are not showing up in school or not doing well. So our original first contract was to promote in Success in Schools. All our youth development work is promoting Success in Schools, academic support, tutoring, and we have a library. So we continue that today. We've been able with having the district be receptive to our cultural specificity, our approach to warrant contracts that put us into a number of schools and on your behalf. We have a complete youth development component that has our advocates visiting schools and working with teachers or counselors or whoever, and the student on site, working with the parents off site or the children. We also transport children from their home school site to NAIA as required to take advantage of our computer lab or our library or things of that nature. And those activities continue to this day. So I'd be happy to give you more information about what schools specifically we're located in, our schedule, and if we can do more, we will do that for you.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
And actually, we say a little more about the Early College Academy, too.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Superintendent. It's not a secret that our community has had some concerns about the relative success of Native children making it through Portland Public Schools. And I think we've been long advocates for reforms, and many of the concerns you've heard from parents or folks of how difficult challenges that young people have. Well, Native children, for the longest time, were graduating at a 20% graduation rate, if you look at the cohort from the 9th grade to 12th grade. And children are just not making it through this system in significant numbers. And so, actually, about 12 years ago, that's when I started with NAEA. Nicole Maher was our director at the time, and we started talking about NAEA looking at education from going into the business of education, alternative education, or community education. And so we developed an agreement with Joe McFerrin with POIC to study this and to operate a classroom at NAEA, a single classroom. I was the principal and discipline and part-time teacher there at NAEA at the time. I say that because that led us to kind of think that we could be effective in this way. We had a little classroom, we had 5 or 6 kids, we had our first Native graduate that summer. And at that time, there was a lot of interest in the district at small schools, small high schools. And we were then of that kind of mode of thinking, well, maybe we could, as NAEA, play a greater role in the business of education for our children, and decided to pursue that. I was fortunate enough to get the support of the superintendents along this to endorse our pursuing this, and that translated into a contract which established the NAEA Early College Academy as a community school, I think you call it now, but originally it was an alternative school. We provide on-site support for 9th through 12th graders, and we have an enrollment approximately 100, 105 or so, maybe a little lower right now, I haven't checked. But it allowed us to then demonstrate that we could find qualified teachers, that we could build a student body, and to provide opportunity for children to succeed. And I think that our delivery on quality education has paid off. I think we've demonstrated our ability to graduate students. We're going to have our first graduate this year on time, from a 9th grade to a 12th grade on time. And for us, that's a big deal, and for our children. So that's how we got into the business of education. I was fortunate to be there to get this thing started and to do the planning grant. And then I found a school that was not in service called Whitaker Lakeside, I think, at that time. And when I went to look at it, then I could hop the fence, and it was out of service. And I wanted to see what the backyard was. And so I jumped the fence and walked onto the backyard toward the slough. And I had been writing about an ecological school, and I used to refer to it as the E-School, and people thought that was Hispania, right? It was my ecological view, and that was tying land to the classroom. So very simply, a school that honored its land, it tied to the animals that lived there. It was that ecological broad view, and I wanted to tie then the slough, what was our backyard then, to the classroom. And so that seemed like a perfect location for the school to be sited. And so I approached Portland Public Schools to secure a long-term lease. We were very good with the terms. We had tremendous support by the Northwest Area Foundation to allow us to rehab the school, and that turned into us approaching the district and going through your process of identifying surplus schools, which this was a surplus school at the time. We, I think, brought a lot of sweat equity and a couple $1 million to the deal, and suddenly it became a facility the building became alive. And I know many of you had been there, and I think that you see a lot of living, a lot of life, and a lot of energy from the children that go there, from our elders, and the staff that do the best they can in managing some very difficult situations. So that's kind of been our kind of volley into education. I think we have not regretted it in any manner whatsoever. It is challenging, and we have a long way to go to kind of live up to the standards that you expect and we expect. There's nothing greater in our community as our accountability to our children and to the parents and to our elders. We seek their guidance. We support their engagement. They're there. If we have a situation, we invite them in, or they invite themselves in. They are ever present, and it's a very important dimension to our programs that is a safe facility. The children know it's safe there, and it's a challenge every day as any other place. But I would welcome anybody visiting and would like to see that more closely up close and personal. We offer as good a program. We provide the meals and support services and the gatherings as need be. We still do a lot of cultural classes, activities at night, but we continue our sports. So I'll get off my soapbox for now, but that's it. Thank you, Superintendent, for
what's the philosophy behind 3/4 of the people, which is what I heard, being elderly as opposed to children? I mean, theoretically, here we are working on a site that's with an organization that's around children, not really around the elderly. I mean, there's plenty of organizations around the elderly, but with 3/4 of the people living are elderly and only 10, there'd be only 10 children in that site?
Sure, so elders play a very important role in the intergenerational housing community. And in this particular case, we decided to have a 3-to-1 ratio, so 3 elders to 1 family unit. And as a condition of tenancy, if you would like to kind of live there, we invite you to take a look at this situation, this opportunity, the housing we offer, but the expectation that with your tenancy that you offer an hour or two or some time being given back to the children who are there. And so you actually commit to not just living there and paying your rent, but also volunteering with children and provide them as a quasi-grandparent or a mentor to the family as they try to challenge, take on the challenge of family development. That's the reason for the 3-to-1. So we don't want to place too much on one elder to over volunteer, so that's why it's a 3-to-1.
What's the restrictions and what's the rules for who gets to live there? Let's say it like that. Looks like a nice place to live to me.
Well, we hope, yeah, we are going to certainly.
So how do you decide who gets it?
Yeah, there's going to be.
What's the qualifications and so forth?
Yeah, that's still in formation. We'll probably pattern much of what we do similar to what Bridge Meadows does, and so there's a whole description of living at their site and what would be living at this site. If you have an interest in making an application, I think it is going to be affordable, so it's going to be geared to, I think, 60% of MFI. I can't quote but that's the market rate in the area, in the Lens area. It will not, so it'll be kind of affordable housing, but kind of geared to the community standard around that location. We'll try to specify the type of volunteerism that we invite you to participate in, and that could be classes or one-to-one with a child, working with a parent. At Bridge Meadows, they have activities among the residents there, the elders, to support themselves. They also invite parents or family members to join them. They work directly with children. They provide tutoring to them, and so there's a number of activities, and that would be outlined, so there'd be no surprises for you. So, well, I just want to take advantage of the location.
Are those with all children, or just 10 children that are in the housing? Well, let's say 10. I mean, you have 10 families, and if they each had one, that'd be 10.
Yeah, so it'll probably
maybe
be more
someone
than just
would have 2. There could be.
Yeah, no. At Bridge Meadows, it's probably more than 1 child, and so we don't differentiate between that. So children that live there, they'll be looking at the quasi-grandparents and offer support, and that's what we found. The experience, and Dorinda is much more articulate in terms of the impact it has on the elder community themselves, and in terms of purpose to living and improving their health and their longevity, and so that's all good. The behaviors that we'd like to see, the volunteerism is specified, so there's no hidden surprises. It's not for everybody, but they have had very little turnover, and they've had people really improve their health and well-being as a result of the interaction and engagement with children. So it's kind of a proverbial win-win for many of the folks that think that is the right place for them.
And I'm just going to do a quick time check that we have 5 more minutes allotted for this item on the agenda, so I wanted to give other board members who had any comments or questions an opportunity. Director Regan.
So thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your passion. This is a project that I've been very excited about for a long time, the intergenerational nature and the support for the Native community, the support for foster kids. At the same time, I have some specific questions about the amount of money that we're talking about. And I need to know where I get the answers to those questions. Do we have somebody here who can address those questions?
Be good ones to ask in public.
Okay.
I can give it a shot.
Okay. So in terms of the Portland Public School contribution, we're talking about $4.5 million, and then a land contribution of $780,000. And then now we have street improvements that we will be paying, I think, 55% of $729,000.
Could be as much as.
Which adds up to about $5,700,000 or so. And what we're ending up doing with that is basically having room for 6 classrooms, 3 pre-K and 3 kindergarten classrooms, which seems like incredibly expensive classroom space. So I'm trying to understand the math of how you can have 6 classrooms cost that much. And I'm trying to understand where in the Portland Public School budget those funds would come from. So if you could help me out there.
Yeah, I'll take the second question first. As we look at, certainly the reason for starting to talk about these numbers is, again, the cost of the construction is not before you, but we need to be thinking about that, of course, down the road as we move forward. We've identified 2 sources that we think that we would utilize to pay for that. First is by selling a piece of property that we own. The last piece of property that we own at the Washington High School site that Portland Public Schools has an option on that property, and so when we are ready to sell that property, we would offer them the opportunity to purchase it from them. That's one source. And then whatever that does not pay for, we are looking right now at making up the difference with the construction excise tax. Excise tax.
Okay. So, and both of those sources of funds could obviously be used for something else. So the bigger question is, how do we end up, it looks like these classrooms, I mean, if I just take, it looks like these are fantastically expensive classrooms.
Yeah.
So I need to understand what that's about.
Sure, and what I can tell you right now is that that cost estimate right now includes, again, it's a cost per square foot, and the cost per square foot, which I don't have in front of me, but I can get to you. Right now, we're looking at a cost per square foot that's kind of similar to what Fabian is doing, using that as a most recent building for which we have cost estimates. Certainly, there
and
are...
So, I'm sorry, so how much is that per square foot?
Oh, I would like to, let me... Oh, there you are. What are we looking at square foot? $250? $250 a square foot. And I believe that includes certainly contingency, that includes soft cost. Is that hard cost? Or is that just soft cost? That's hard cost. And then, okay. So that's hard costs. And we have got, this is Ross Cornelius. He's a project consultant helping us with the project. So some of that is the cost of construction. It's permit fees, it's soft costs as well. The whole $12.5 million. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on that cost structure?
But can I just ask a question then? I mean, if I'm dividing $5,700,000 by $250 a square foot, I'm getting 23,000 square feet. And I'm not good at math, so maybe somebody could tell me if that's wrong.
Well,
so how big are these classrooms?
The classrooms.
I mean, typically we would look at 1,000 square feet or so.
Yeah, let's go back to see if we can see from the plan here, and it's not on there. I've got a cost here. The other thing is the cost of land is a sunk cost. That's not, we show it as a cost in part because that's value of property that we're putting into the project, but that's not certainly anything we have to take out of pocket.
Could you go over that again, because I was confused about the land cost. You already did a lease, 99-year lease.
The land cost, so the land cost that we have in is the value of this property that we have here that is going towards or being used for the Early Learning Academy. We already own the property, so it's not more
We only
property
lease
out of
half of
pocket.
the property.
Yep, we're only
Got it.
leasing half the
Got it.
property.
That's right.
Yep, that's, again, I'll figure out how to use this. Yeah, we're leasing that portion. So the 780 is the rough estimated value of that property, and that's just in as a placeholder. That's not additional out-of-pocket money. Excuse me. And I'm going to see if I can't answer your question about the square footage. There's also,
Well,
I mean,
another-
a typical classroom is 900 to 1,000 square feet.
Say that again?
A typical classroom is 900 to 1,000 square feet, right?
Perhaps another comparison might be to the Clarendon Early Learning Academy, and there might be, you know, as follow-up, since we're not voting on this
Yeah.
tonight,
Yeah,
that could
we
be an
can- we
additional.
can
Because
go
what we're
over to-
looking at here is early learning classrooms with wraparound services and other space.
we
That's
do,
what we're
definitely.
building.
There's office space, of course, there's bathrooms, there's additional space that's yet to be programmed. Some of this, we're still in conceptual design, and that's also the cost for fees and the cost of bringing utilities. So it's the cost of a new building.
So I
But
guess
we're
I'm
happy to
hearing-
break that down in something that's a little bit more demonstrative for you.
Well, I just
We'll
want to,
get back
yeah,
to
I
you.
just need to
Yeah.
put you on notice that I'm not comfortable with how the numbers are working here, so I'm not there yet. You need to, I need a much clearer understanding of this, because right now, this seems like we're spending an awful lot of money on 6 classrooms, so.
And we're selling Washington School to do it?
Director Curler.
Sir. I have a couple questions. Could you, I think it'd be helpful to people to understand the 60-40 split in
Sure.
terms of the cost share. And
Yeah.
Can you kind of detail that a little bit out?
Yeah, happy to do that. So the 60-40 cost share is looking at the cost of this building. We're looking at this as a development partnership with NEA. Again, we did something similar with the Concordia University on the Fabian site, so this is a model that we've used before. The 60-40 split looks at the total number of square footage in this building, which is roughly 33,000 square feet. And we have looked at how much of it will be controlled by NEA. When I say controlled by NEA, through a long-term lease, they will kind of control and program the 2-story longhouse where the wraparound services will be, where the kitchen will be, and the communal space right there. And they will also control 2 classrooms. PPS will control these 3 classrooms, all of this space, but we will get to use some of this space as well through a reciprocal agreement. So when we looked at, in the partnership, how do we divide up the cost of the partnership and who's going to pay what percentage of this building? We looked squarely at square footage. So of the roughly 33,000 square feet, roughly there's about 12,000 there and another 2,000 here, and that makes up roughly about 40% of this building. PPS is controlling roughly 60% of that building. So as we go through the design, that 60-40 number may float a little bit once we get further on in the design, but for right now, that looks like what the cost share split will be based on the square footage. Is that clear?
So when you ask us to vote on this next week, we're voting on a formula, not the actual numbers?
That's right, that's a formula. And that formula will be, we will come to you with a a development agreement later on in this year, similar to what we just took to you for Fabian, and that will outline more detailed costs, because we'll be much farther down the road in the design process. We'll talk about how much the actual cost is and what that share is, and we'll probably have actual numbers about how much each will contribute. And we'll talk about other resources. Will we have other resources from new market tax credits or from other public agencies, much as, again, as Fabian did, or the Earl Boyles project at David Douglas School. So we're looking at a variety of funding sources that will lay out all of those funding sources, costs, and a more definitive cost share. But you're absolutely right, it's a formula for right now.
Okay. And then my last question, I think it's my last, was the, how did it get determined that the demolition would be cost share? Because that's where so the housing's going, so you think, okay,
Yeah.
well, that's the housing.
The reason we agreed to that is because we, again, are looking at this, we're looking at this frankly as a joint project. When we first looked at this, the housing was going to be on this side, the Early Learning Academy was going to be here. In response to neighborhood concerns about traffic dispersion, we made the determination with NAEA jointly that it made sense to flip the site. We also knew as staff that the Foster School was really in not great shape and not very conducive for the kind of use that we're looking at. So we jointly agreed that this kind of scenario, this kind of site plan, was really the best site plan for the site. And since we jointly made that decision, we considered the demolition of the school a joint cost.
Okay, thank you.
Again, looking at this as a partnership.
Director Law, we'll come back to you, Director Dillon.
Thank you for the presentation. I just want to say that when the city council or councilor members approached us with this idea, I found it really exciting. They invoked the Bridge Meadows, which has been very, very successful. I know that in talking with the Lentz community, they've been very disappointed with our letting this property sit vacant for so long without much to do. And so I remember early in my board term, we talked about what are some options. Could we make it into an early learning center? And because of the work that needed to be done, it would be cost prohibitive. So we looked at, I asked just about a number of different things. What would that look like? And it really just sat there because there wasn't anything else. And then the city came to us with this idea, which again is really innovative. And I guess I'm concerned that it's getting framed as $6 million for 6 classrooms, because I look at it as a $12 million project for that facility that we're paying half of. I get why we look at it both ways, and I think it's important to have the dialogue, but I worry that that gets lost. I also want to say that we have talked a lot about the disparities faced in our communities. And Native Americans, if you look at our graduation rate, and if you look at even their access to programs like Head Start, they are well underserved and being poorly served at best. If this gives us a shot to serve those families better, then I think we have to look at new ways. Maybe that's more money, maybe that's not. Again, I'm not seeing it as not, but I can respect somebody's different opinion about that. But the excitement I've heard, while I know that there are neighbors concerned about traffic, which in every rebuild or every modernization I've seen that we've done, even Franklin, they're concerned about changing traffic patterns, which is understandable. The Lentz community is very excited that we're taking action on this. Again, this is just the feedback I've heard, taking action, and very, very, very happy with the partnership between PPS and NAEA. It's been spearheaded by a big community process to really engage, and so I'm looking forward. And I guess I find myself, one, really excited that what I think I just heard NAEA saying, we're committing services through 3rd grade. That is extraordinary. That is true early education at its finest, pre-birth or birth all the way to 3rd grade. That is something that we wouldn't be getting if we weren't doing something like this. And I guess I wasn't here on the board when we developed Ramona or the Ramona Place. But this seems the similar innovation, except adding housing with intergenerational piece. And I'm curious whether or not it went under the same type of scrutiny. And again, I don't know, but I'm just very excited about this, and thanks for the presentation.
Go ahead. Okay, Director Knowles.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you, Ray, for being here. Love to hear that history. Appreciate the long relationship that we've had with NAEA. And I just, I want to say I'm very, also like Director Belisle, very supportive of this project. I had the opportunity to be at the groundbreaking last summer. It was a very hot day, but it was really wonderful to see our 15 other partners from across the state and the governor and everybody there to just celebrate this great opportunity that we had. And I think about how we talk all the time about finding really fantastic projects and then replicating those. And here we have this wonderful opportunity to replicate what we did at Rosa Parks, what we're going to do at Fabian, and now here at the Foster site. So to me, this is a really great opportunity for that. And I also would echo Director Belisle in the discussion, his discussion about the cost of this particular. I also look at it like it's over a $12 million project, and we're getting it for 6. So to me, this seems like a really wonderful opportunity, even financially, for
Portland Public Schools, and then you add onto that the fact that we have such an abysmal graduation rate for our Native American students. I want to do everything we possibly can to turn that around, and having a culturally specific early learning center, I think, is going to help us with that, and the interaction between elders and children, of all the children in the school, not just the children who reside in the housing is what a great opportunity. I mean, when I used to chair the Child Care Commission, we talked all the time, the State Child Care Commission, we talked all the time about placing daycare and pre-K in housing that was mostly elder housing, and it was a great idea to have those older people have the opportunity to be active in their life and to influence children. So, I mean, I think this is a great project, and I'm really looking forward to us moving forward with it.
Dr. Buell, you
Beg your pardon?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions about this in general. It looks like a great project. NAEA is a great organization, but I have a responsibility as a school board member in Portland to make sure that we're doing things that benefit the school district clearly, and to make sure we look at those things. And so I'm curious about why we would move our kindergarten, where we would have a kindergarten away from all of the aspects that you can have if you placed it in a school. You've got, what are we going to get here? Librarian, PE, art? What do we have that is kindergarten? Aren't they away from a school? And the Head Start is a Head Start. We've got Head Start, but that's covered with Head Start money, and I'd be curious how that Head Start money figures in here. Also, I'm curious about the city put in a certain amount of money. We've put in a certain amount of money, and they're backing this program. Are they still doing as much as we're doing? That's a concern. I've got a lot of little concerns hanging around here that just keep hanging out there that I'd like to tie up before we vote for this.
So, and I'd like to ask Harriet Adair, who has been our champion of early learning in the district for a very long time, and this is, I'll let you address the.
Which brings me to the first question about the early learning itself, early learning preschool. We've been moving into that sphere, but we don't get any money from the state in that sphere. Have we moved in any place where we're spending K-12 money on early learning? Because if we're doing that, I have questions around that too, because it's given to us for K-12, not for pre-K.
Okay, so I'll be very happy to talk to you about that. And as you know, because of our relationship is not the first time you and I've sat in front of you to talk about early learning, so I'm pleased to return there. As we've done that in the past, Director Buell, we do have state money that goes to support early learning that is more than beyond pre-K. When it was DSEG money on your first watch on the board, it supported what we called early learning, early childhood education centers, which were for pre-K and K, and the money that we have now, which is a combination of state money, which is OPK dollars, federal Head Start dollars, City of Portland CHIF dollars, and Title I dollars, is also supporting pre-K and kindergarten as well. And so early learners now has expanded beyond just what people typically think of as Head Start. So we have braided funding that is supporting the education of children that are 4 or 5 and moving into, as we've now formed these partnerships, we're trying to find more partnerships that begin to provide the wraparound supports for families and children that move up through 3rd grade, because we recognize that the good things that happen in Head Start were cutting off at 4. They'd entered into kindergarten, it was like, see you. So now we're working the ways so that we can provide these supports up through 3rd grade, because we believe that the populations that, once we get them in, that we have historically underserved and are now moving to serve more in a more integrated fashion with more different kinds of supports built around them than we've had in the past, definitely cannot be all financed through Portland Public Schools. They need to be financed through partnerships, and we are formulating strong partnerships across the board. So each Early Learner Center has different groups supporting them, but every Early Learner Center has those 4 funding sources flowing in through them. The wraparound services that are, and I'll use Clarendon, which is in your region, and invite you to come and see us at Clarendon, is basically supporting all the populations, because we have mixed populations in the classrooms, each demographic. So if you entered that center, you would not be able to tell which child was Title I, which child was city funded, which child was OPK, and which child was federal Head Start. They're getting the same kinds of supports, the same kinds of strong programming. And it's built upon what I truly believe was the foundation that was established early on 50 years ago when we first got Head Start, in the 80s through the DSEG integration program, where the whole program was, where the board drove us to begin looking at how do you provide stronger programming for those populations at an early age. And we're just building on that and expanding on that. It's very positive.
So let me go back to my original question.
Okay, which one was that?
Which is the Clarendon. Let's take Clarendon now.
Okay.
Do we spend any K-12 money for Clarendon?
Any K-12
Any money that we get from the state for K-12, which is what the money, we're not giving any money for anything outside of K-12.
We do get money from the state. We get OPK dollars from the state.
Right, but I'm talking about, do we spend any of the K-12 money that we get from the state in the state school fund, which is given to kindergarten through 12th grade? Do we take any of that money, and do we take any of that money and spend it on pre-kindergarten classes at all?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, the answer would be no, because we don't have any kindergarten classrooms at Clarendon.
So just
so the $5 million that we're giving out here, the $4.5 million that we're using on spending out here, we're saying that's on kindergarten. Not on the daycare or something. So there's no money, there's none of our K-12 money that is spent for any pre-K children at Clarendon.
Let me be very clear to you again.
Okay.
We have OPK dollars, which are state money that comes to us, and we are using it at Clarendon.
Right, and it comes specifically for pre-kindergarten.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We are not using any kindergarten money because we don't service kindergartners at Clarendon.
So if I could just interrupt for a moment, because it is 7:30, we've got a lot of folks and partners in the audience who are waiting for their time on the agenda. So if we could just maybe wrap up specifically about this project versus sort of the large, it sounds like getting into a larger discussion about early childhood.
So are you saying to quit discussing this? Because if you are, then let's make a motion and stop the discussion.
Well, I'd like to wrap up the discussion on the topic of this.
No problem with anything. Yeah, I know what you would like to do, but I kind of not ready to wrap it up. I'm trying to make sure I'm solid here.
I'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
So what I'm hearing so far is wanting more information about costs from Director Regan, and maybe more information about the programming or how it relates in terms of the spending.
If any of the money that we're spending on pre-K is for K-12 money that we get in our K-12 budget. None.
For this project.
We can get you that.
None?
Yeah, you can get that.
We'll get you that.
And we'll have a little public report on that next time.
Well, we're going to be just having another discussion and vote next week. So any other information item
on that? Okay.
Right. Any other information that board members need from staff? Anyone else? Okay, I'll just then thank you for sharing your concerns or thoughts, and I'll just wrap up quickly to say, again, I just really appreciate the presentation. I'm thrilled about this project. It's innovative, it's clearly needed, it's based on a proven model. I've had the opportunity to participate in that Oregon Solutions many months long process with all kinds of stakeholders and experts and elected officials and everybody else, and that was a really exciting process to kind of really dive into how this intergenerational model works, what the need is, and how it could function at this site. So I'm thrilled by the opportunity to invest in this, whether it's differentiating, it's differentiating resources, it's finding new resources, it's being creative. I would never want Portland Public Schools to step away from an opportunity to innovate, to leverage funds, both public and private, from different levels of government, and to better serve our children. So I'm just thrilled, and know we can get additional information from staff, because this has been in the works with a lot of smart folks for a long time. So I'm just really excited to see this moving forward.
Chair Atkins, are we also going to get my other question of the superintendent answered next week?
Which was the other question?
The one, the other question was why we would put kindergarten away from the building, away from
So
a
additional
larger
information
building.
about the thinking
Yeah,
behind that.
why would we take kindergarten and build this section over here instead of building on to another
Oh, and I
building?
forgot to add thank you for bringing that up, so we'll have that on the list. I forgot to add another reason to support this is because of the overcrowding we have in Southeast and the need to have
all along
additional
that
classroom space.
92nd corridor.
Yeah, so
Right.
really exciting to be able to, and to no longer have an eyesore in the neighborhood, but actually have a beautiful community serving building. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Okay, so next on our agenda is.
Yes, Chairperson?
Yes, we'll
Yes,
get that
what?
material.
Director Beal. So next on our agenda is charter school renewals. And so Director Curler and myself and Director Morton served on a charter committee. We had a hearing with the schools and a follow-up meeting, discussion and opportunity time with both folks from the schools and staff. So we'll be kind of chiming in when we get to the discussion part of it now, but for the first part, we're going to invite Kristen Miles, our charter school manager, down to the staff table just to give us a quick timeline update and kind of where we are in the process. And then we're going to be able to hear brief presentations from each of the schools, and then we'll have a discussion. So welcome, Kristen.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you a little about our 2 charter schools in renewal and our 1 request for contract extension. So I'll just give a brief timeline of each and just a little blurb about each school, and then I will let them speak for themselves. So Emerson is up for a extension of contract. Emerson School is a K-5 project approach charter school in the Park Blocks that currently enrolls 144 students. It is a national model for the positive discipline behavior approach, and over the past several years has engaged deeply in race equity work led by a parent group called GUIDE, they can tell you what that stands for, which advocates for institutional changes that promote inclusion, diversity, and equity. Since GUIDE was founded, Emerson has also seen its student demographics shift from 19% students of color in 2008-09 to 49% students of color in this school year. Emerson is currently a level 5 school and has received the highest rating on the state report card every year since it has been rated. Emerson opened in 2003 and is currently operating under a 5-year flexible agreement, which terminates on June 30th, 2015. Because this is the 6th year of the contract, staff must make a recommendation to extend the contract by 1 year or to initiate a full renewal process. So I'll describe what the flexible term agreement is. And this is what it states in their contract. During the 5th year of the contract, we determine whether a renewal process is deemed necessary based on Emerson's ability to meet academic performance standards, its fiscal stability, its adherence with all applicable state laws, and its compliance to the terms of the contract. If it is determined that a renewal process is not necessary, then the contract would be extended by 1 year with board approval. Both the district and the school have the authority to initiate a full renewal process in any year of the contract, up until the 10th year, at which time the renewal process would be mandated by statute. Emerson has requested that its contract be extended by 1 year as per this agreement. We reviewed Emerson's organizational, financial, and academic performance and recommended to the superintendent that the contract be extended by 1 year, which also reflects the superintendent's recommendation. So I can go through all schools and take questions, or if there are any questions in between.
I think we should go through them all and then we'll go back.
Great. The next school up for renewal is SEI Academy. SEI Academy is a 6 through 8 full-service charter middle school in North Portland that enrolls 128 students currently and provides a comprehensive middle school program along with wraparound supports. For the past 2 years, it has been designated a model school and has won numerous awards for its achievement, including the 2014 National Excellence in Urban Education Silver Award and the designation as a Title I Distinguished School for its achievement in student performance and closing the achievement gap. It opened in 2003 and is currently operating under a 5-year agreement, which terminates on June 30th this year also. We made a formal visit to SEI on February 4th, and the board subcommittee on charter schools held the required hearing on March 9th. Staff reviewed SEI's organizational, financial, and academic performance within the framework of the statutory criteria that the board must use to determine whether or not it will renew the school. As per statute, every subsequent renewal of a charter school after the first renewal period must be for no fewer than 5 years and no more than 10. Staff recommended to the superintendent, and the superintendent also recommends that the contract with SEI be renewed for a 5-year flexible term, as I just described with Emerson. And the next school up for a renewal is Lamond Immersion. Lamond French Immersion Public Charter School is currently a K-3 full immersion charter school in downtown Portland that will eventually grow to be a K-8. It opened in 2012 and is currently operating under a 3-year agreement, which terminates on June 30th. Lamond currently has 171 enrolled students. We made a formal visit to Lamond on February 17th, and the board subcommittee on charter schools held the required public hearing on March 9th. We reviewed Lamond's organizational, financial, and academic performance, again within the framework of the statutory criteria. Now, the charter school statute for a first-term charter school states that the first renewal of a charter school will be for the same time period as the initial contract. So therefore, we are recommending that the contract with Lamond be renewed for a 3-year term.
Great. And Superintendent Smith, did you have any comments on the recommendations?
No, just these are really valued partners who each play a really unique and valued role within our system, and I think are kind of exemplify what it is that you would want in charter partners. So I'm just pleased to have all of them up to make the recommendation for renewals.
Well, we're going to get to, what we were going to do is have each charter school partner come up and do a brief 5-minute presentation about their school, and then we were going to have questions and comments. Will that work? Okay. Okay. Great. Okay, so let's just begin. So each school is going to do a 5-minute presentation, and those of us on the charter committee had the opportunity to hear about them. It was great, so I know we'll all enjoy this. So let's start with Lamond French Immersion Public Charter School, and please come on down, and we'd love to hear from you. Welcome. Bienvenue.
Merci to that.
Good evening, all of you. Thank you for letting us present to you today. My name is Shuka Rezvani, R-E-Z-V-A-N-I, and I am the president of the board of Lamond Immersion, which operates Lamond French Immersion Public Charter School. We are excited about what we have achieved at Lamond and created in our first few years, and we wanted to give you a very, very brief glimpse into what daily life looks like at Lamond. And accordingly, we asked a parent volunteer to create this short video that I hope will give you a little bit of Lamond's flavor. It includes photos taken from our annual yearbooks, which is a project also taken on by parent volunteers. And we were told to sort of try to keep these really, really brief, so we're happy to elaborate if you want, but otherwise we'll probably keep our comments extremely brief. So.
Les grands sont bien fatigants, se plaignent du mauvais temps, mauvais contre la météo, et rêvent du pays chaud, car ils oublient qu'ils ont été petits, et qu'ici dans notre pays, l'hiver n'y a pas de soleil qui plombe, il y a seulement de la neige qui tombe. Sur mes copains et moi, et malgré le froid qui nous gèle les doigts, nos cœurs de marmotte restent bien au chaud. Les grands sont toujours pressés, ils ne veulent pas s'arrêter pour voir les flocons valser dans le ciel de janvier, car ils oublient qu'ils ont été petits et qu'ici dans notre pays, l'hiver n'y a pas de soleil qui plombe, il y a seulement de la neige qui tombe. Je m'appelle Cora et je parle français. Je m'appelle Julie et je parle français. J'aime l'école parce que j'ai des amis. J'aime chanter. Je m'appelle Ivy et je parle français. J'adore le monde.
I'd now like to just briefly introduce you to our head of school, Dr. Chantal Dufour-Martel. Dr. Dufour-Martel holds a bachelor's degree in cultural anthropology, a master's degree in educational leadership, a doctoral degree in special ed from the University of Oregon, and she has 20 years experience teaching in Canadian and American public schools in partial and full immersion programs. I feel like I should even list everything because we feel like we have this amazing gem who has arrived and is an expert in immersion education, in bilingual education, and early literacy, who's really turned our school around and really gotten us to where we need to be. So without further ado, Dr. Dufour-Martel.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you this evening. My name is Chantal Dufour-Martel, and I'll spell that last name Dufour-Martel. To be very honest with you, I did not prepare an extended, notes here this evening. I feel that we have presented, we've written up, we've analyzed the data, we've presented it, and so I've had a busy day. Let me just make a compte rendu, resume for you what my overall sense is in as far as just looking at the data of our school and how our children have performed. So we are meeting our student performance goals and agreements as specified in our charter. We are in our third year of operation, as Shuka mentioned, and this will be our first year where our first grade, this will be the first year where our third grade students will take the state test. Our own internal testing data from previous school years indicate that students are making, on average, stronger than expected annual academic growth in both reading and in math. Our French language data indicates that students are making exceeded gains in reading accuracy and oral reading fluency. And we have the tools to measure that, which is really awesome. So over time, students of underserved races and economically disadvantaged students are also making gains in comparison, or comparable gains to their peers. I'm happy to answer any question you may have at this time. I don't have anything more that I really need to say.
That's great.
So
thank you so much. I think what we're going to do is have each school give their 5-minute presentation, and then we'll go through and do any questions. So you'll be on hand, right?
Great, thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So next, if we could have representatives from the SCI Academy Public Charter School come on down for a brief presentation. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Superintendent Smith, Board Co-Chairs Knowles and Atkins, and board members. I'm Linda Harris. I'm an administrative coach at the SCI Academy. And to my right is Timothy Rogers. He's a principal of the SCI Academy since October 20th.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, we prepared a PowerPoint presentation that the board subcommittee saw on March the 6th, and we have copies of those for anyone who'd like to see those. I could leave them with Karen. Basically, I'd like to start just with a testimony, and then Timothy might want to make some comments. Tony Hobson Sr. is here. He may want to make some comments as well. So, okay. I know that Mr. Hobson and Mr. Rogers join me in thanking the charter school staff, Kristen Miles and Jenny Brayton, who's not here tonight, for their continuous support. We appreciate an open invitation from Superintendent Smith to attend the monthly Leadership Academy meetings. We also appreciate the support and assistance from PPS departments, the Research and Assessment Department, Human Resources, Instructional Technology, Curriculum, and Funded Programs. I have worked with the SEI Academy for the past 11 years, and my belief is that the charter school is stronger than ever. The school is committed to excellence, and we do not give up on children. We're proud of what we have accomplished as a charter school. Our students have matriculated to high schools where they are achieving success, and many of them are currently attending college. So we employ highly trained professionals, committed educators who are united by a common purpose. So despite the challenges that we face this year, it has only strengthened our resolve to move forward with an even deeper sense of purpose and commitment. We are currently seeing high interest on the part of many parents to become more involved in the school, and we will build upon this momentum and increase our students' chances of success. The Academy benefits each day from our unique position with the SEI agency under the leadership of Tony Hobson Sr. We have operational and programmatic support. So we will continue to promote the beliefs, practices, and procedures that earned us a level 5 on our state report cards for 2 consecutive years. So we are committed to our vision of creating a premier middle school in Northeast Portland where graduating 8th graders will enter high school prepared for success. Mr. Rogers.
Yes, I'd just like to add to Ms. Harris' testimony as to why our charter school should continue. I just want to focus on our academic achievement on the 2013-2014 report card, state report card. SEI met 71.4% in reading, 65% combined in math. As far as our, just to highlight some of our academic growth areas, we had a combined median growth percentile of 69%. In math, we had a combined median growth target rate of 34% in math as well. And as Ms. Harris stated, SEI has also received a level 5 rating 2 years in a row, which is a level 5. Some of our exit goals for our students are to prepare students to meet or exceed the state's 8th grade benchmark and to prepare all participating students for success in high school. We also want to prepare our students who will be able to think, problem solve in school in a variety of situations they encounter in life. Some of our other exit goals are to prepare students to develop their abilities to become self-sufficient individuals and to prepare students who will be responsible, positive, contributing citizens of this community.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so last but not least, if representatives from Emerson Public Charter School could come on down for your presentation. Good evening.
I feel very alone up here. I'm Tara O'Neill from the Emerson Charter School. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to talk about extending the terms of our charter for 1 more year. I'm going to apologize because mostly I'm reading. I just didn't memorize any of this. So. Emerson's in its 12th year of operation as a charter school in the Portland Public School District. In our 12 years, we've established a record of academic achievement, community involvement, and commitment to service that has been consistent and unwavering. Our unique program includes using the project approach, which is a very structured framework for project-based learning, which encourages real-world problem solving, making connections between content areas and personal experience, collaborative learning environments, and creating engaging final work. In addition, we use a social-emotional approach grounded in positive discipline, acknowledging children as active participants in their communities whose actions and behaviors have consequences for the whole. The class meeting is at the center of every classroom community. Students learn the language of appreciation, conflict resolution, asking for and accepting help from their peers, compromise, empathy, and kindness through practice at class meetings. Intentionally, The skills learned through this clear social emotional focus are the same skills that create successful learning conditions for project work. Project work requires collaboration, appreciating others' contributions to the whole, advocating for your ideas, compromising well, recognizing everyone's individual strengths, and accommodating difference. All of these are skills we all need to work well in the world, and ones we teach explicitly at Emerson. Project work allows for deep exploration of topics through which children apply the literacy and math concepts learned during instruction time. They present data using statistics, they read for information, they amass vocabulary lists, and they write in project journals. They learn scientific inquiry, how to pose meaningful questions, where to look for answers, and how to present their results. They don't just learn the answer to the question, but how to go about answering any question. Our program is successful as measured by the Oregon Report Card, receiving the highest rating every year that we've been rated, and as measured by the district's positive annual evaluations, and as measured by parent interest in the program year after year. This year we have about 350 applications for 13 spots next fall. Our commitment to self-reflection and improvement is reflected in our ongoing equity work, begun with intent about 5 years ago, partnering with 2 very brave parents, and continuing still, where we're showing a sustained shift that Kristen Miles talked about earlier. This year being our first year, at least starting with 50% of our students being white and 50% being of color this year. And a tiny shift changes when you're a small school. So now it's 49 and 51. This is probably the 4th or maybe 5th time I've been before the school board to ask for continued support or sponsorship for our school's charter. And each time I do this, I look for new ways to convince you of our school's value to the district. Whether it's through showing test scores or parent survey data, or by talking about our commitment to equity and sustaining a welcoming community for families and students of color, or about our phenomenal teachers who mentor student teachers and who sometimes move on to teach at district schools, or to teach at universities where they teach teachers who will come to district schools. We add value to the district through all these things, though we do it on a very small scale, with only 144 students and 6 teachers. We already provide opportunities for interested district teachers to observe our classrooms. We've offered other professional development opportunities for educators, and we provide technical assistance and ongoing support to other district charter schools. We stand at the ready to help make programs like Emerson's available to more than just our small population of lottery-winning students, though we're happy to remain a small, effective lab school for the district. Either way, we look forward to another year of the district's support, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Tara. All right, so colleagues, what I would propose just to be sort of an organized discussion is that we just discuss one school at a time and cover any questions or comments there. We have the partners here, so we could start with Emerson since Tara's already down here. And I would invite members of the Charter Committee, if you want to weigh in first, maybe because we had the additional time spent at the hearing and the follow-up meeting. And thank you again to the partners for coming to multiple hearings and meetings and sessions and doing a presentation multiple times. We really appreciate it as we kind of move through this state-mandated process. So Director Curler, Director Morton, any thoughts around, let's just start with Emerson.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And it's always a pleasure to hear about Emerson and the work that you're doing. And specifically, I think the thing that struck me, not just the evidence that is you're positively serving students in Portal Public Schools, but the work of your guide group, which I felt was a charter, but a majority culture organization or structure response to the need for equity and the need for diversity within your school, your academic setting. That really was inspiring, and in fact, when we were in the committee meeting, I felt like it became almost a conversation with the other charters, is how do we not bottle that, but how do we create an opportunity where Emerson has a chance to provide technical assistance to other charter schools where we know this has been a really significant gap. I think equally, the SEI Academy can offer a great deal of assistance in providing technical assistance to not just charter schools, but other schools as they demonstrate their ability to work specifically with a community that has been historically underserved, but they are getting fantastic achievement results out of. So that's the kind of stuff that I love to think about, and I think Emerson brings that in spades. So thank you for the work. That was all of my commentary, though.
Director Curler, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I actually just going to lump mine together. So, which is on all three of these schools. I agree with the superintendent's recommendation. It was a pleasure to hear the presentations and to look at the materials. And then our work as a board in a district is not only to approve these applications, but also continue to see how we can incorporate some of the successes. So look forward to kind of like what you said, Matt.
I'll just add in really quickly that I appreciate it very much, and I know I have been critical of Emerson and some of our other charters for that lack of diversity, so I personally appreciate the hard work that you and your parents have put in and the progress that you've made and your leadership on this. So look forward again, even though I won't be on the board anymore, just to seeing that potential for you to, again, to share, you and your parents to share with us and with other charter schools. So really, and I support the superintendent's recommendation as well and appreciate your long service to the children of this district. Any other comments or questions about Emerson? Director Buell.
There's really, for Christine, I think, Emerson we're renewing for 1 year and SEI we're renewing for 5. There must be a reason about that, but I don't know.
Thank you for that question. So when Emerson renewed 2 years ago, we came up with an innovative model for renewing, in that they're a very strong school and have always been. And so the statute says that the renewal period after the first renewal can be for no less than 5 and no more than 10 years. So what we implemented into their contract at the time was that at the 5th year, when they would normally go through renewal, we would do our official site visit in the fall and make a recommendation or a determination at that point whether we see the need to put them through the full renewal process. And if that was the case, then we could go ahead and do that. If they were performing well and a strong organization and were financially we had no concerns, that we could still do our annual evaluation like we always do, but then just extend the contract by 1 year, which would give us the option to do that up until the 10th year, at which point they would have to go through renewal per statute. Also, at any point during that 5 to 10 year period, we can unilaterally say we're going to do a full renewal process. They could also request a full renewal process. And we've offered this to several schools that have had multiple strong renewals and strong annual evaluations.
And a question for Emerson School. Do you, how are you dealing with coming Smarter Balance and the Common Core? And do you find that that's helpful for your school, or is it not helpful? What do you?
I'm trying to think of the great quote that one of my teachers had about this that was just spot on, and I'm not going to remember it.
Politically works out up here.
I will say we're prepared. We're prepared. I think that the district has been extraordinarily helpful in terms of allowing us to participate in training and in a lot of other things around this. And certainly, I feel like project approach learning lends itself well to Common Core standards, and so in that way we feel prepared. I think Smarter Balanced is a we'll see how it goes with everything this year, so, but we're not avoiding it for sure. We're prepared.
Thank you.
Director Knowles, can I ask?
Chris and I just want to follow up on the process and extensions versus renewals. So when you do an extension, you still have to go in every year and look at the school, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so
even
when you do...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If you're not in an extension year, there is a requirement by the district to go in and do an evaluation of every charter school every year.
Every charter school every year, even if they're not for renewal? Okay,
Yes.
that answers my other question. Thank you.
Any other, Director Black?
I just wanted to chime in and say thank you for your focus on equity. I know that the last time I sat on the charter renewal, we were trying to figure out how do we engage the state. If we're going to be able to have charter schools as an option, how can we enlist you as help to help narrow the achievement gap that we're all trying to work toward? So I appreciate your intentionality, and with that, I'm just going to highlight another challenge and hold you hopefully to task with it. There's only one that we're approving, one application tonight that we're approving whose free and reduced lunch exceeds Portland Public's. And so if I look at your free and reduced lunch and I don't just look at demographics, you're only at 5%, or about 5%. So I would hope that we would find additional ways to engage our families in poverty as well.
I'm glad you brought that up because I would love to comment for a second on that.
Yeah, please.
There are two factors at I think the core, and one is accessibility to charter schools is very much a barrier, and trying to bridge that is part of the process that we're in, of course. So not having school buses or that easy sort of neighborhood connection. We're in the middle of downtown, purposefully not in someone's neighborhood. And in retrospect, perhaps that wasn't the best choice. So it's difficult for people to get to us. But the other factor in our case is we don't compel people to fill out paperwork. And at the same time, we also leave payments on things like fees or school trips on an honor system. So there's, especially with hopefully full-day funded kindergarten next year, very little incentive at our school to fill out the paperwork because there's no requirement to have that to be able to pay what you can for a fee. And so there's a balancing there as well. If you, I think about 15% of our kids order our school lunch. So if you're not ordering the school lunch, other than that, there's not a reason and we don't compel. But that being said, you're absolutely right. And that's our next hurdle.
Director Regan, did you have something on Emerson?
I might have gotten a question answered. All right, let me just ask you a general question. Portland Public Schools just went through a process of kind of reforming our enrollment and transfer lottery system. And in that process, we give a preference or higher weight to low-income kids. As a charter school sponsored by us, you don't fall under that lottery, though. You fall under the state's rules. Are you or other charter schools trying to work with the state to change that?
Very actively. There's actually a Senate bill that should be voted out of committee tomorrow that will allow charter schools, specifically by state law, to weight based on, I forget what they finally worded it, historically underserved populations, which will include students with disabilities, will include race, will include socioeconomic status, and various other, so that we will be able to do that, and it will not be required. It's going to say may, I think, in the law.
That's interesting.
Okay, we'll add that to a future legislative update then.
Yeah, no, that's great, and I assume that we're very supportive of that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Same side.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so let's move on to any questions or comments about SEI, and I don't know if committee members had any additional, yeah, Director Morton.
Again, I want to reiterate the work of the SEI Academy is exceptional. I don't think there's any way around it. One of the things during our presentation, Tony Hobson made a comment about we never intended this to go on forever, and that was I found that to be a really thoughtful question or thoughtful statement. I think we have to, as a district, step up to the plate and say, what would it take for SEI to not a need to have this go on forever. And it would mean a significant change in the way we serve African American students in this district. So I really incredibly appreciate the work that you all do, and particularly during transition moments that we know happen every day within the life cycle of schools and other organizations. And I really appreciate the partnership with Portland Public Schools.
If I could just chime in and ditto to all that, and I would say even more specifically, I would be interested, I mean, we had the conversation about really formalizing, having a way for the district and SCI to figure out a roadmap toward that. Not that you're doing an amazing job, and not that we want to put you out of business, but we could do in the sense that we need to be able to serve African American students in all our schools as well as you are at SCI. So I would love to see even memorialized in the resolution as we move forward in this partnership. How can we really start getting serious about how we figure out what are the conditions that would be required? What would that look like? And how can we, knowing that you are, of course, doing the day-to-day work of running a successful school, and that's hugely time-consuming, but is there a way that we can create a process together to look at that? That's what I would love to see. That was what I thought coming out of it. So Director Buell.
Yeah, SCI, a wonderful place. I was curious, though, when we were doing the discipline disparity report early in the year, you guys were pretty high. You were like 17% exclusionary discipline, and you come down from 29, 23 to 17. And I was just curious of how that comes about, because we have a lot of schools that are less than that. But I mean, what can you kind of talk to that? What is it? I mean, I don't know, it just caught my eye. I went, whoa, that's pretty high exclusionary discipline rates.
Mr. Buell, where did you get that 17%?
From our
recently?
report, from our exclusionary discipline report stuff on our
so
charter.
Just a district
the
report?
District, it was on the district papers that we got around exclusionary discipline for charter schools. So did they get the wrong information? Did they get the wrong information? Did they have the wrong stuff? I don't know. That just caught my eye. I went, whoa, 2 years ago, 29%. That's really high. Exclusionary discipline, that runs right up there with the highest.
That was high, and it is coming down. And I don't believe right now, if it's 17%.
It was 17, that would have been last year. 17%.
Certainly not this year, for sure.
17.9% or something last year.
Not this year, for sure.
Yeah. What is it about this year? Has it come down, you think? Do you have any idea?
Probably 12.
About 12%, yeah, about 12%.
About 12, it's still, which is still fairly high. What, do you have anything that you could share with us about, you know, what you've tried, hasn't worked? I mean, because we really, and we rightly so get clobbered on that, and rightly so, that we're way too high, and we're trying to work at it, and we had the presentation from the teachers tonight saying, well, what you're trying to do isn't working either. So, I mean, you're always thought of as a kind of a model for working with children of color.
So I'm sorry, can I just do a clarifying question, Director Buell? So are you referring to the number of suspensions?
No, I'm not referring to this chart. I was referring to the old chart that we had, which is the number of exclusionary discipline percentages that they've given us.
So the number of suspensions and
expulsions. Do you have any expulsions?
No.
No.
No, okay, so suspensions were running about 17% last year, and about 12% this year. Okay. I mean,
Okay, I will,
I didn't know
as I
if you
said, I
had
can
something
make a
that
couple of
you
comments
wanted
on
to
that, and
talk
maybe
about.
Mr. Rogers would want to make some additions. At the beginning of this year, the staff was very interested in restorative justice, but only a few of our staff members had been trained in that approach to discipline. And so there was uneven implementation. So our plan is to train our teachers this summer and then move forward in the fall with that program.
Yeah.
But what we do now, we are really focused on, you know, the restorative part versus punitive, and we are looking very closely and monitoring and tracking children in what we do in response to consequences for infractions.
Yeah. Well, thank you for just coming. It just caught my eye, and I thought I'm going to ask about it.
Sure, and one thing I would like to comment on is that kind of sets SCI apart is that the fact that each one of our grade levels has a coordinator. And the coordinator plays particularly 3 roles in a student lives, which is the parent, the mentor, and the teacher. And so a lot of times when we have situations where, let's say students are in trouble or they do something that breaks a rule or an infraction, a lot of times the students is talking with their coordinators, coming up with a solution, understanding where they went wrong and how they can own that problem and how they can fix it and how they can move on, even before they come to the principal office. And so I believe that intervention right there is really setting the SCI apart, and it allows our students to focus on, as Ms. Harris said, being more restorative versus being more punitive. And so our coordinators, they do a fantastic job working with our students, helping them understand where they went wrong and how they can fix it even before it reaches the principal office.
So you have a coordinator at each grade level?
Yes, that's correct.
So you have like how many grades? How many 5th grades? I mean, not 5th.
We have
how
6th, 7th, 8th. We serve 6th, 7th, 8th.
How many
students per grade level?
Per grade level, yeah.
6th grade we have approximately 48. 7th grade we have approximately, I want to say 42. 8th grade about 40.
2 classes per grade level, or do you?
No, it's just each coordinator just has 1 class per grade level.
No, but I mean, each grade level has 2.
Yes.
2 classes, and then you have a coordinator, and anybody, like 7th grade, you have a coordinator and then 2 classes?
No, the 6th grader has 1 coordinator, the 7th grade has 1 coordinator, and the 8th grade has 1
but
coordinator.
each grade level has
1 coordinator.
One coordinator, but
per.
2 classroom teachers then?
Yes.
So you got 3 people on your 7th grade?
Actually, the way we worked it out is that we have, in order to have smaller class sizes, we have 3 sections for each grade level.
So how big are your class sizes?
13.
13 or so? 13, yeah, okay. It's good, maybe you can give that to us, since we're always looking for you guys for some help. You can go 13 kids per class across the district. Yeah, that's a good idea, we like it.
So let me just add a couple of things to this question of suspensions. Realistically, in my opinion, this has a lot to do with resources, and over the past few years, we've been cutting back in our overall SEI, and we don't see our charter school as separate from the rest of the services that we provide.
Yeah.
So when you end up with, in a small situation where kids who do step out of line, sometimes we have found that it's much easier to send them home because there's not the resources within the school setting to take care of them. Now, realistically, and even though that's been the case in the past, we've been having a lot of conversations because sending kids home is not the answer. I mean, that's not even the SCI way. And as we talk about restorative justice, in my opinion, is the relationship model. We've been doing restorative justice from the onset of SCI. We've been doing that for 30 years. It's all about attitude, relationships, and treating kids and dealing with punishment out of love as opposed to punishing the kid. All of that. So that's
a secret, isn't it?
It's that's the foundation of what we do. That's what we've always done. But sometimes in terms of if you're trying to keep kids safe, if you're trying to give teachers the opportunity to teach and you don't have enough resources to have bodies, because if you move a kid out of a class, they got to go somewhere. And in some cases over the past few years with cutbacks, we didn't have enough staff there. We're trying to beef that back up. But even in spite of some of that, I mean, they've shared with you some of the outcomes that we've actually gotten with kids. So, but that's really more of the reason why, and that's not a stat that we're proud of. So I don't want to run from that. That's real. That's a real stat.
I'm just curious because it came up and I went, oh, that's it's not so it's that it's so high. It's just that I'm going. I better ask about that so I get some idea.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate you guys coming tonight.
Any other questions or comments for the SCI team? Director Belisle?
I just wanted to thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that you do every day. I appreciate that sentiment that you do not want to be doing this, not because you don't love the kids and not because you don't want to be involved, but you want the system to be able to serve all kids as well as they're serving some kids. So thank you. And I would be interested, and I hope my colleagues would agree, that there's obviously an expertise here that our current school system outside of charter schools does not seem to have. And I know that SEI has been gracious enough to take some contracts with other school districts to do some work about how do we help our staff, how do we set up our systems to make sure that we're serving all of our students well. And so I would be curious to see if we could work on some arrangement like that. And I also just wanted to ask while I've got you here, I noticed that the number, I think it's a percentage, the percentage of African American students that you're serving is is declining in the past 3 or 4 years. I'm just wondering if that's a change in demographics that you're seeing families move to different parts of town.
I think one of the things we're seeing is that because there is the biracial column,
More
check
people are
mark,
choosing that. Great.
that's made a great difference.
Yeah,
great.
That makes sense.
In the past, usually African American.
Right.
I would like to say, per your other question with regards to Portland Public Schools, how do we look at how we can be more helpful? We're certainly open to that. Not suggested that we don't want to do the charter school, but some of you who've been around for a while remember that what was called the Jefferson cluster was the guinea pig for K-8. So there's not middle schools in that cluster. So we became the middle school for that cluster. So if we want to talk about how do we work together to where maybe we don't need our charter school, we need to be talking about a middle school in that cluster. I mean, again, I know Jefferson's a focus school, it doesn't really have its own neighborhood anymore, but we need more middle schools back in that area, and we would love to work with the district. In fact, me and superintendent had a conversation about this some time ago with regards to Ockley Green and the possibilities of that. So we are certainly open for that conversation, because our best work is to help you serve our kids better. Most of the kids in America do not go to charter schools, they go to regular public schools. When we do charter schools, it's a nice opportunity for us to show you how it can be done differently, but in long term, it is much more beneficial for you all to be able to do this at a high level so that we don't have to chase money to do it ourselves. And that's the work that we would prefer to do.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you.
No, thank you for that, Tony. That was exactly on point. And my only comment is thank you very much again. Just like Director Blau, thank you for the work you do. And I also wanted to say congratulations on your 2 years as a model school and your very high test scores and how you're doing. Clearly, a wonderful example for us, not only at SEI and your charter school, but also the work you're doing with us at Jefferson and with our other high school students. Really do appreciate that work and the success that you're having, getting those kids to graduation. So thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Director Regan.
I just had one quick question, sorry. Linda, when you were doing your testimony, you made a comment about the challenges we faced this year. And was that specifically around some financial issues, or was it something else? I wasn't.
One of the issues had to do with us trying to find a math teacher, and that was a huge problem because they were in short supply.
Okay.
And so we finally did hire someone who's excellent.
Okay.
But that wasn't the biggest problem. See, she don't want to tell the whole truth. I'm gonna tell you the truth. I don't have nothing to hide. Look, we had after 2 very successful years, we had a very successful principal decide to leave in August. In August. The second week in August. And then he took basically our second in command for our charter school. Then went with them. They both went to Park Rose. I mean, they got paid more money. They went to the public school system. We're not mad at them for that, but I mean, imagine you're late in August and you got, trying to get the school open in September. That posed some very, very serious problems for us this year. First of all, finding replacements and kind of keeping our arms around the structure within the school with those kind of high-level folks not being there. So that was the biggest challenge.
That's helpful. Yeah, I didn't know what was behind that, so that's really helpful. And thank you
all right,
very much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now Lamond, any thoughts?
Bonjour.
Yeah. Thoughts from the committee? Right? Yeah, thoughts from the committee about Lamond?
Yes.
Go ahead, Director Martin.
Again, I'll be a broken record and thank Lamont for their work and particularly their perseverance through, I think, was a demonstration of how difficult it is to build a school and build a charter and create support for that. And I think they've emerged out of that much stronger and very committed. I was really impressed during our process in their focus on academics, their focus on service to the youth, service to the families, I think there are really very sincere attempts to reach out to more diverse communities. And I think it's that there's been that recognition, which is that first step, and they've made progress in doing that. Not that that is ever progress that is, you can always, you know, that it's just a box to check. It takes time to develop, but I appreciated that effort moving forward. All in all, I'm in support of their renewal, and definitely wish them the best of luck moving forward.
Thank you. Great, thanks. I mean, I would just add, I mean, I think part of our discussion, I mean, the concern I continue to have, though, I'm really excited by the new head of school and the direction you're taking and the progress that you've made, but do continue to have concerns about the lack of diversity in who you're serving, and also that fundraising piece, which does seem, although I know you've made some changes to make it less of a perceived or actual barrier for families, but that, again, I'd be looking to see you know, continued outreach, greater diversity, and real assurance for families that everyone is welcome and part of the community, whether or not they can make that significant fundraising contribution. But other than that, certainly it's you're doing really well, and it's exciting to see having such a strong, we know having such a strong leader is so key for any school, so congratulations for securing such a wonderful leader. Other questions, comments from board members about Lamont? Director Regan.
I would just say that I oftentimes talk with great pride about the number of language immersion strands we have in Portland Public Schools, and it's fun now to say that we have 6 when we add French in the mix, and this is something I don't think we probably would have done on our own, so it's a nice add to our mix, so thank you.
Thanks. Director Blau.
I just want to echo, it's not going to be a surprise, but again, looking at ways you can reach out to help us address the achievement gap. I know that we have a number of immigrant families who actually come from, for example, African countries who already know French, so it would be a natural partnership. So it's good to hear that came up in part of the renewal process and that you're paying attention to it. I appreciate that, and I also want to mention, I appreciate you calling out the financial, the donations or the contributions, the fundraising, but I also want to say how nice it is, so congratulations to all 3 applicants, that this is the first renewal that I've sat through where there wasn't a question about their financial viability. Yes. That somehow all 3 schools, and that does not come easy. It is not easy on school districts' reimbursement. And when you get a percentage of reimbursement from us, that is not easy. I know that's a lot of personal sweat and equity and tears that go into that to make it happen. So congratulations, and thank you all 3 for being such a strong part of our system. And please join us, continue to join us in how do we serve our most vulnerable families.
Great, thank you so much. I mean, I just want to wrap up by thanking our staff, both Kristen and also the folks at great point, Director Belisle, that all 3 applicants are on strong financial footing, and that we haven't seen that in the past with all our charter schools. I know both Kristen and our financial staff work really hard with our charter schools to help with the challenges of that, but really appreciate everybody's work to make sure that we are not putting students in the position of having a school on shaky footing, that you're all on solid footing. So with that, thanks to all the teams for your time and sharing your thoughts and your successes and challenges with us at this meeting and many previous meetings. We are going to vote on the 3 charter renewal applications at our next meeting on April 28th. So one more step in the process. But thank you all so much, everybody, SCI, Emerson, and Lamont, for being here.
Thank you. Ruth, could I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
We do have a charter school LEP. LEAP that is going to be closing this year. Are we going to be getting a presentation at an upcoming board meeting on what that process is going to look like?
Kristen, do you want to say something about that right now?
Because obviously we want to make sure we land those students in a really healthy way.
Yes, I'd be happy to update you at a future meeting, and also we're looking into what action the board will have to take to end the contract officially after they are closed. So we'll update you with
So
that.
we'll make a note to put that on an agenda setting if it isn't already for our list.
Perfect. Yeah,
So-
that's what I wanted to make sure. we
Yeah,
were doing.
perfect. Thank
So,
you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And also, I just wanted to thank the board members who served on this committee.
Yes,
It's a lot of time, it's a lot of work, and Kristen, you're a rock star as always, so thank you for your support.
Great. All right.
Thanks, Kristen.
Okay, so next on our agenda is discussion around the Step 3 complaint. So as background, on March 30th, 2015, the board voted to consider a Step 3 complaint. So tonight we're discussing it so that staff can prepare a resolution for us to vote on at the April 28th, 2015 meeting. And first, I know it's been a long evening, and I think, a lot of athletes and maybe parents and coaches out there. So do you all want to stand who are here around this issue, or athletes from our high schools? I see Franklin basketball, Trojan, yeah, thank you for being here. So I appreciate you taking the time out to sit through the rest of the meeting to get to this issue. So, all right, so prior to the March 30th meeting, board members received the full record of this complaint, including the written appeals and the Step 1 and Step 2 reports. And then in our information for tonight's discussion, we received a memo from staff with an overview of the process, a memo from the district ombudsman with an overview of the process, as well as a memo from the district athletics director with a proposed basketball schedule for the 2015-16 school year. So before we begin board discussion, I wanted to invite Allison Horn down to the table to share her comments. Thank you so much for your patience in waiting to get to this agenda item and this discussion tonight. So, Ms. Horn, we'll have the lights on for the 3 minutes just to give you a guideline, just to kind of give you the sense, but we really appreciate you being here, and thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for voting on March 30th to consider the appeal. My complaint and your acceptance of this appeal has led the administration to finally review its scheduling practices and to propose a preliminary set of recommendations for the 2015-16 basketball season. Those proposed changes are to recognize that there was a disproportionate loss of instructional time for JV girls and to propose to eliminate that loss by eliminating the 4-game stacked nights. Also, for any stacked games, there will be an equal number of 7:30 p.m. start times for boys and girls varsity teams. Unfortunately, the administration is proposing this change not to ensure equal playing time for girls in the primetime spot, but to address the late start time for boys varsity games. It should be recognized that this change is being proposed not only to prevent the late start times for boys, as the administration has stated, but also for all of the reasons previously raised, specifically equality for girls and Title IX compliance, neither of which are stated in the memo. It is important to emphasize that the administration's proposal is not final, and this board's decision still has an impact on the future schedule. When the administration presents its final 2015-16 basketball schedule recommendation to the board, it must comply with Title IX by eliminating inequities in the loss of instructional time for boys and girls, ensuring an equal number of 7:30 p.m. start time for boys and girls varsity teams, ensuring that boys and girls will participate in all future PIL showcase type events. The mission statement of Portland Public Schools Athletic Department is pretty clear: to build community, character, and academic excellence through equitable athletic programming. However, throughout this lengthy and arduous process that finally brought the Title IX issues to the board's attention, every administrator along the way ignored its own mission and failed to appropriately recognize and take sufficient steps to remedy the Title IX issues created by the administration's own scheduling practices. At every step along the way, the administration chose to sit back, circle the wagons, and hope that no one would notice the inequities in their discriminatory scheduling practices. That coaches would soon be too busy with the start of the season and become laser focused on their teams. That parents would get tired of the bureaucracy and drop the complaint. That is, until the board's vote on March 30th to consider the appeal. Given that 139 days will have passed between the formal complaint and the board's expected vote on the appeal, I urge the board to initiate, through the audit committee, a broader review of the overall athletics program to ensure compliance and support of all student athletes across all of the PIL athletic programs. After all, the essence and strength of equality is the lasting effect of Title IX, and compliance, not complaints, should be the measure of success. So, once again, thank you for your time, attention, and action.
Great. Thank you very much for being here tonight. And thanks again to all the students. We're going to have a discussion with the board right now.
I have a question of her.
We're not doing
This is a hearing.
It's Ms. Horn is providing comment
This
to
is a
us, and
hearing.
then we're going to have discussion.
This is a hearing.
We're following the complaint policy that we voted on, and this is the process laid out in the policy.
And you can ask questions of the people
No,
who
actually, in
are
the
coming,
policy, it states that the complainant can offer public comment.
Which, you know.
Right.
Would like to see that, please.
So in the meantime, thank you so much, Ms. Horn, for being here. So now we're going to open it up for discussion.
Allison, please don't leave. We're going to have questions for you in a minute.
No. We're not doing that. No, we don't do that. As part, all we're doing is voting on the
Show me
substance
where
of
it
this.
says we don't ask questions in a hearing.
So I don't know if Jolly is here and wanted to answer. Ms. Horn, thank you very much. So
She's up here. She's coming in.
Okay, great. So what we're going to be doing, and we'd have a resolution to vote on at the next meeting, depending on our discussion of whether our findings around this appeal. I'll let Ms. Patterson begin.
A hearing, you ask questions. That's what a hearing is. It calls it a hearing, doesn't it?
Sorry, I'm going to have to pull up the AD here, but it does say in the...
Doesn't it say a hearing?
It says that the complainant, this is what the board discussed when we passed the complaint policy and administrative directive, and it says that the complainant can testify at during the public comment.
And so we actually,
Would you
because
read
we
it
had...
to us?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. I'm sorry.
And I'll just add while you're pulling that up, we had a number of the slots were filled during the regular public comment, so we asked Ms. Horn, we pulled out a slot of public comment for her related to this issue. And the other thing, too, I would point out, remember when we voted on this new policy, that this was going to be a new process and that there's going to be an opportunity, I believe it's built into the resolution approving the policy, that we would review it. So if we're finding that the way that we set this up is not satisfactory, this is the first time we've had a step 3.
This isn't how we set it up, though, is the problem.
It's my understanding that
Chair
it is,
Atkins.
so maybe we have...
It's not the way we set it up. We set it up to have a hearing.
Thank
You
you.
can ask people questions. When they come in the hearing, they give you things, ask them questions.
Not always.
That's what a hearing is.
Not necessarily, and not in this case.
Well, a hearing is different in this case than it is in the
what I'm
whole
hearing is
world.
that you are disagreeing with the way we set this up, so we can note
No,
that.
I'm disagreeing with our interpretation of it.
And, yeah, let's let Jolly.
The section 4.50.031, the complaint resolution process, says that if the board votes to consider the appeal, the board will vote on the substance of the appeal within 30 days of the board's decision to consider the appeal. The board will have the full written record of the appeal. The complainant may submit additional written information to the board and may provide testimony during public comment. So that's
We're not cross-examining.
And we're not having a hearing.
Yeah. So at this point, I'd ask my colleagues thoughts around what we want to do in terms of a resolution, in terms of this, the step 3 complaint, and what we want what direction we want to do and what our findings should be.
Great.
So Director Knowles.
The one thing that I think that is the most important around this is to make sure that we have, and I actually have sent a memo after our last meeting about this to the members of the audit committee and to the board members, that we have a full audit of our athletic department and what we're doing with all of our athletic programs across the district, not just what we're doing in basketball, but what we're doing in every other sport that we have. And it was interesting, after our last meeting to talk about this, I spoke with some of the young women who were here. And there were complaints not only about the basketball, and I think there was another young woman there who was a track athlete, but also just around how we treat young girls or young women when they're athletes. Do they receive the same kind of promotion in their schools when there's an athletic event? Are there signs up in the hallway? Is there a notice over the intercom in the morning about the fact that young women are having a game that night? And just what are the other things that we're doing to help draw a crowd for these young women who are working so hard? So when we do our audit, I'd like to see it be not only of the athletic programs, but also a piece about how we're actually promoting and marketing these events in our schools, in addition to just the fact that we're making sure that these young women have an equal opportunity to perform. So I suggest that we make it a little bit broader than just at the teams. So that would be, that's my major concern today.
to be much more broad than just a solution to basketball.
So I'm hearing to put in the resolution of our finding on this that we would direct an audit along those lines. Do I have
Yes.
other folks interested in that?
Yes.
We would do
Okay.
what?
That we would
There was
have, in a resolution on our findings around this complaint, that we'd add a direction to the superintendent, well, actually, really more directed to the audit
yourselves,
committee.
yeah, for the audit committee.
To the audit committee to come back. I mean, we
Well,
need
I
to.
don't know that we would specifically put a direction in there to the audit committee to do this audit, but it could be a recommendation to
Interest.
consider it, because
Okay.
whether it's an audit or a review, I mean, we can figure that out as we go, but yeah, it's
Okay.
necessary.
Well,
Okay.
the audit
Why
committee
would we
doesn't
put
do
it in-
reviews. The audit committee only does
Why would we
audits.
put it in this resolution, which is a resolution prayer? Why don't we make a separate resolution and have the superintendent come back with what we want to do?
Well,
I mean, it's okay if you want to do it, I guess, but I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I mean, we
crazy.
could do it as a separate resolution. I'm just thinking just to, because it's all on the same topic. I mean, we want the
Fine.
audit committee to come back.
It's
We've
fine.
already
Yeah, yeah.
are asking the audit committee to come back with, you know, a list of different topics when they hire the new person. So we can figure, but I'm hearing the interest in having the audit, having that recommendation, I'm hearing that interest. Okay, so that's good. And then we have the new, sort of like preliminary recommendations from the coaches and athletic directors around equal number of early and later start times, around addressing, getting proportionality in the, or addressing the disproportionality around early dismissal and loss of instruction time. I'm very interested in that. I like the direction that the new memo is going, their preliminary recommendations. So I was thinking something along the lines of, you know, saying we support that direction, proceed with that work, maybe report back when you've landed on something. That's where that was my reaction to it. I don't know where other folks were around that.
I'm fine with that, but again, I'm more interested in all of the different athletic events that we have, or teams that we have, not just basketball. So to me,
Right.
that's just taking a small section out, and I'm fine with that, but maybe when we do our audit, we'll find that there's something else that we need to do, but
Right.
it sounds like a good direction to start with.
Okay, other thoughts, Director Belisle?
Yeah, I appreciated the suggestions so far that we've gotten from staff, the recommendations. And I would hope that sports are really important, but so is seat time, or so is time in class. And so I appreciate being really proactive so that none of our students are missing, if at all possible. I mean, that
Right.
should be the advantage coming back to the PIL, is we don't have far-flung games usually. There might be some other districts, something, but we should be able to schedule that. So, and I just want to share a little bit of my thinking in both accepting this this appeal, and I just want to say, Allison, thank you for having the fortitude to continue through this process. Just so folks understand kind of the thing, to me, whether or not it attracts people isn't the measure for compliance. It's whether we're offering the same opportunity, and so it might make some of our teams feel bad if they have smaller attendance. But that shouldn't be the reason. I can remember, I could imagine, I wasn't around or too aware when Title IX was passed, but right, that could have been the same thought process behind why even include Title IX. Who wants to go see girls play sport anyway? And I think that's just a real disservice, and obviously we've come so far. And I just want to re-emphasize and put some emphasis actually on looking at all the other pieces. I don't know, I know some of us are on our devices and are able to see email, but we got some written testimony from somebody here that wasn't able to testify, but just talked about how do our bands support our teams, how do cheer teams support our teams. I mean, there's a whole host of how are we setting this up to make sure that the young ladies that are performing and that are working their tails off to be the best selves get the same support from us as a district.
Exactly.
So I appreciate this coming back, and I appreciate staff's working to make this work. As I began thinking about this, trying to remember my own high school schedule about how this was in 4 teams, and they're going to be traveling all over. But I understand it's complex. But again, I appreciate the effort so far. But I would be very supportive and quite emphatic that we do a larger review or audit of how we're doing this. And I would say that compliance isn't actually my bar. We want kids to thrive in this. So.
Other comments? Director Curler?
Sure. Yeah, I would echo everything. I think it needs to be larger. And I want to also emphasize with Allison's point as well is that in the resolution we recognize that we're making changes because of the complaint and because of our frankly lack of compliance, and that we're not going to do that in the basketball, and we're not going to do it in these other sports as well.
Director Regan.
I wanted to give a huge shout out to Allison and to her daughter for bringing this to our attention in such a strong way. And I guess the question I would have is, are we doing any reflection internally as to why it took coming all the way to the board before we started to address this issue? I mean, Title IX is out there. We know what it means. It means equal treatment. And so I am deeply concerned about our complaint process, that there wasn't somewhere along the way that somebody said, you know what, this is a really good point, and we need to be looking at it. So I'm glad that we decided that we needed to take another look, but it should have happened sooner. And so I'm curious about what kind of reflection process there's going to be internally with the staff around this, because we should have caught it earlier. It sounds like it's been a pretty god-awful process for this family, and it shouldn't have been. So I'm very supportive of us doing a much more full review of Title IX compliance. This may just be one little piece of a much bigger issue, and it would be helpful for us to hear from, do a survey of students, of parents, of coaches, and understand what all the issues are, and address them already. I mean, we now know that we were out of compliance. We're, I think, all agreeing that, and we need to address it in a more comprehensive way.
And actually, a couple things I would say to this, and I also appreciate Allison for hanging in through this whole long process. And we've got a couple things happening here that are new, one of which we're at the beginning of rebuilding the PIL and expanding athletics. So it's actually a great time to be doing the comprehensive look. So I'm really actually excited to take the opportunity to do that. And you're the first person to go all the way through our complaint process. Woohoo! But I'm just going to say, like, part of what we're trying to do is have a complaint process that's responsive, that gets looked at different points, and actually to have taken something all the way through that got looked at by different people at the intervals that were established in the. I mean, this literally is how long it takes to work a complaint through, because we used the process and the board served its function. So truly, this was the successful use of the complaint process. And it was grueling to get all the way through it. So just to say, though, both really important things to be doing at this moment in time, because we're trying to do, again, rebuild the PIL and really rebuild. We're back doing middle school athletics for the first time in forever. We've expanded girls' sports. So there's a bunch of celebratory stuff in here, too, and right time to be making sure we're doing it the right way. And we're also trying to have a responsive complaint process, and you, like, really persevered in making your way through it. So on something really important. So thank you for doing that one. And yeah, we'll be looking at all of it.
Okay, so.
I had one more question.
Yes, sure. Director Regan.
I also wanted to suggest that I had the exact same impression that Director Buell had, that we were actually going to have a hearing, and we were going to be able to have a dialogue with the complainant. So to me, this is more of a review than a hearing. When we voted to have the board hold a hearing, I had a completely different expectation of what that was going to be. So I do believe that we need to take a look. I mean, again, we're new in the complaint process, but I think we need to take a look at it, because if I were Allison, I would be pretty dissatisfied with going 139 days and then being given 3 minutes to talk about it to the board. So
And part of our
we need to rethink that process.
And part of the
It's
complaint
not
process,
respectful.
we built in at the end of this that we would review it and look at whether we were, how we were
Right.
feeling about it. So like this was great to have something we went all the way through and used all the timelines and did all the formal things because we've got something real to now look at and say, did it do what we wanted
Yeah,
it to do?
First time through.
Yeah.
Director Morton.
I think just 3 really quick comments. One is we should never allow logistics to get in the way of us serving students. And, well, I guess 2. And the other one is that this is 2015. We should not be having this conversation right now. We need to make it very clear to not just our community, but the staff here at the district that it is not okay for us to be having a conversation at this level in 2015 that puts into question the fact that we're treating students differently because of their gender. It's not okay. So I think I agree with Director Regan that this is a moment for us to be introspective, for us to hold ourselves accountable and say, okay, this process is new, we've learned some things, we did some things, but we really need to take a deep look and say, what is it about our culture here that allows us to treat students differently in a way that is not appropriate, just isn't. So that was my comment.
Okay, so thanks everybody. I really appreciate the discussion, and again, appreciation to Allison and her daughter and everyone else for sticking out through this first time going through this process to this level. So staff is going to put together a resolution for our consideration next week. I'm clearly hearing we're going to be recommending the larger, more comprehensive look. But that we're also, I think, generally supportive that the staff has been working out some preliminary recommendations that would get at the equity in start times and in making sure that we have avoid this disproportionate loss of instructional time and tackle those 2 issues that are part of really the substance of the finding here.
Yes.
So, and then adding in the piece of the recommendation and direction from the board around wanting to have that larger look. I think those are the main pieces, but obviously we'll have a draft resolution, we'll circulate it, and we can make, discuss it and move forward. And then I think, duly noted the concern about not expecting this format and wanting to look at that when we do the review of the new process, as well as the larger piece of just for this particular topic, that the reflection that it should have come sooner rather than needing to come all the way to us having this discussion. So appreciate everybody involved in this, and we'll look forward to having a good resolution to move this forward and make some good progress next week. So thank you all very much. Okay, so next on our agenda is a proposed resolution in support of safe routes to school. And really, this is not us doing anything new or different. You'll recall we had an update around safe routes to school and the great work that's happening in our district several weeks ago, several meetings ago. Really, this comes from a request to us as one of the leading partners around safe routes to school to join in a sort of a regional advocacy effort to secure increased funding for this great program. So staff prepared a background memo for us, and we have this draft resolution, which we would just per our protocol discuss tonight to see if there's any concerns, and then we would vote on it next week. Justin Fowler-Dollard, who's the project manager, is available to answer any questions. We don't have a formal presentation. We just wanted to bring this forward and for your consideration. Carol, did you have any comments?
Just that this has been a great partnership, and I think important that we're showing up as a board supporting the effort that's occurring.
Yeah, great, thanks. So any comments or questions about this resolution stating our support for safe routes to school? Yeah, Dr. Blau.
I think I have one question that under our one resolved for the resolution, it talks about supporting Metro to develop funded safety projects and programs that encourage walking, biking, and transit use to get to K-12 schools throughout the greater Tri-County metropolitan region. And I just want to highlight that because what I think that is saying is that we have been fortunate to have the support of both our local transit agency and our city to allow our high school students primarily to use TriMet. And I know some of the surrounding districts have had struggled with that and what that looks like. Is this resolution us highlighting the fact that we support TriMet and the other jurisdictions and Metro to continue to look at that as a solution for other districts?
Yeah, that's correct. So you're supporting a regional look that's beneficial to all the districts served by Metro, and then all the multiple modes of transportation that don't involve driving a car.
Right.
Great.
Great.
And so that's exactly what we're doing.
Thank you. That's what I thought. I just wanted to highlight it.
Colleagues, any comments or questions about this? Director Moore?
Real quick, the only other thing, and I know it doesn't need to be in this at all, but I want to mention when we last talked about safe routes, it was my understanding, and I think this is correct, that it includes all buildings where, that include Portland Public Schools academic or school function.
Yeah,
right?
so you,
whether the PPS owns that building or not.
Right, so it's an important distinction to make between, so what we would call, I guess, regular, for lack of a better word, PPS programming offered in the district, which I think is about 46,000 students, and then another 2,000 plus that are receiving either charter school education, community-based programs, or SPED, et cetera.
Right.
So we entered into an IGA with the city to expand access to Safe Routes to School resources, and those are available to any school site. So if SCI wanted to receive support from PBOT Safe Routes to School, staff members, including myself, would be made available to support SCI. SCI, by the way, going in the transportation, is an awesome example of using TriMet. So I live in North Portland, actually not too far from SCI, and I see middle school kids using TriMet to get to and from SCI from various access in the city, or using the same bus system to get to additional resources. So that would be a great example of resources available to one of our charter school partners.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Great.
I appreciate that clarification.
Okay, anything else? Hearing none? Okay, thanks everybody. I think I'm really excited we'll be able to put in our support for this great program.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you, Justin. All right, so now we have our legislative update, and David Williams, our Director of Government Relations, has came from Salem to the staff table to provide this report. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much, Chair Atkins, members of the board, David Williams, Director of Government Relations for the district. I want to cover a couple of key topics for you about what's going on in the legislature, and then, of course, any questions you might have. So we'll talk about the budget, and then sort of the two biggest policy areas I think so far we've seen in the session, that being SBAC/Common Core, and then the OEIB conversation. So the budget, as you no doubt are aware, was approved by the legislature and signed into law by the governor at a $7.255 billion number. For our listeners at home and those in the audience, it's important, while 7.255 feels like a really, really big number, because 7.255 billion is a really big number, it is, in the scheme of funding education in the state of Oregon, is simply not enough to maintain current program, also while expanding to full-day kindergarten. And this is the story we are trying to tell to our legislators and to legislators from around the state. And it becomes a challenged, nuanced conversation, as every district undergoing budgeting right now has very different, unique, and individual circumstances. Just as we do here in Portland, that is tenfold all over the state in different districts. So that is a story we continue to push. The positive news, of course, is that when the legislature debated this bill and voted on it, and by the way, it was a straight party line vote, all Democrats voting for it and all Republicans voting against it, almost all of them, Democrat and Republican, said they want to see more money added to this budget before the end of the session. So I think that there's a positive that everybody framed this as the floor with which the legislature will seek to enhance the budget going forward. The key there really is going to be the May revenue forecast to see how much revenues are up for this coming biennium, and therefore how much we would be able to add to that budget. The Education Coalition is pushing for a roughly enhancement of $250 million to that budget. I think it's likely we will see something south of that number, but north of the approved number. two key pieces included in that budget that I do want to call out specifically is a new $12.5 million enhancement in targeted services to ELL students. A small portion of that, I believe $2.5 million, is for funding for the statewide ELL plan, which was written up and approved a couple of years ago but never funded. And then $10 million of that will be used as the legislature is going to be creating a new, for lack of a better term, a focus and priority model around ELL programs in the state and targeting resources to low-performing schools to help our students who are at risk in those ELL populations with a system of sort of progressive interventions. But that notion of bringing funding to the table in a progressive intervention system, I think we see as a real positive to help try to change the formula there. Next steps with the budget, of course, as we said, there's the revenue forecast. The coalition continues to advocate hard for enhancements to that budget, and I think, as we know, many twists and turns left in this legislative session around the K-12 budget. The next thing to talk about is the Smarter Balanced and Common Core. Obviously, this has been a big conversation. You all have adopted 2 resolutions around that. Nothing significant on Common Core. There were a number of pieces of legislation that were introduced. Excuse me, let me back up a minute. A key deadline is happening tomorrow at 5 when it comes to policy bills. So if a bill is not worked and moved out of the committee of its chamber of origin, so Senate bill in the Senate, House bill in the House, it is essentially, for all intents and purposes, dead as of 5 o'clock tomorrow. If it is not in Rules, Revenue, or Ways and Means, those committees don't have that deadline. So for us, it narrows the scope of all of the policy work the legislature is going to be doing. When we get to Wednesday morning, we say, okay, what bills are in these other committees and thus still alive? We don't anticipate there'll really be anything specifically around Common Core. There were a number of bills that were directing the Department of Ed to review that or roll it back, etc. None of those were really able to gain any traction. However, there is significant policy discussion and bills moving forward around the Smarter Balanced Assessment, I think really strongly aligned with the positions you all have taken. 3 in particular. The first one, House Bill 2680, is a 1-year moratorium on the use of the results of the Smarter Balanced for both teacher accountability and school accountability. So we think that's a real strong part. That bill came out of the House on a strong bipartisan vote, is headed to the Senate, where we would expect it will receive favorable review. I think there is a push to maybe expand that to a 2-year moratorium instead of a 1-year, so there may be some minor changes, but it will be within that 1 or 2 year.
So they're reading our resolutions.
I take it in and read it to them if they're not able to read it. The next is House Bill 2655, which is sort of termed the Student Bill of Rights bill. This was a main emphasis of the Oregon Education Association this legislative session and others. It contains some key provisions, and it came out of the House again on a fairly strong bipartisan vote. It contains what we call a clean opt-out. So this would allow students to opt out of taking the Smarter Balanced Assessment for any reason, not for simply religious or disability. We see this as a really strong statement that it's not incumbent on us as a district to determine whether or not your religion is valid for you to be opted out of a test. Provides that clean opt-out. It does, however, put a 6-year sunset on that provision. So I think there'll be more debate about that going forward. Requires annual notification by school districts to parents about the Smarter Balanced or summative assessment testing window and when that'll be taking place, and a parent's right or student's right to opt out of that test. By the way, both the opt-out form and this notification will be defined and produced by the Department of Education. And then lastly, gives the department some authority to do rulemaking around student data and student records, specifically as they relate to these summative assessments going forward. And then the last piece is a bill directing the Secretary of State to do a performance audit of summative assessment and its use in the state of Oregon and report back, I believe, September 2016, hence in anticipation of the 2017 full legislative session. So that's really, I think, what we'll see as the scope of the legislation around Smarter Balanced Assessment this session. Then lastly, the Oregon Education Investment Board. As you know, this was a signature piece of former Governor Kitzhaber's education reform in the state. This has had a session-long conversation. It will be, in the end, contained in a bill, Senate Bill 215, but that bill was moved to the Rules Committee without amendments being added. So you remember I said there's a deadline tomorrow, but it doesn't apply to Rules, Revenue, and Ways and Means. Essentially, they're still trying to figure out exactly what they want that policy to look like. So I have a sense, and I'm going to give you what my sense is today. Of course, that changes as we go forward, as the winds shift. I believe that what that will do is to eliminate the actual board itself. They will retain the chief education officer, who will then house apologize for the redundancy, the office of the chief education officer. I think they'll come up with a better title, which will maintain the sort of bureaucracy of the OEIB, although the scope of that bureaucracy is better defined by the budget bill itself and where the legislature wants to go. But they will retain that basically as an advisory position to the governor, and to operate, I think the authority they're essentially giving the chief education officer would be to then convene the Higher Ed Coordinating Commission and the State Board of Ed as sort of a joint body for sort of agenda setting broadly, but without the oversight authority that we saw in the previous OEIB. And then lastly, I believe that will likely eliminate the achievement compacts from that as well. Again, more to come on that, I suspect, as those conversations are still going. They have a very broad work group that continues to work, and we understand will continue to work throughout the interim as well, more broadly on the notion of education governance. Because what we did, of course, is we took and we created a very linear approach: governor, chief ed officer, state SUP or deputy SUP, and then school districts. You create this very linear model, which might have had some strengths, but certainly highlighted some flaws. And I think that conversation is something that they're going through throughout the interim on that conversation. So we'll see more to come on that. If there are other policy bills that you know of or have questions on, obviously there are any number of about 150 we think will still be alive after tomorrow at 5, running the gamut of issues. I think we see a lot of really strong supports the legislature is trying to put forward, whether it be from career and technical ed on down to other programs. I think the legislature is really looking to put money behind the initiatives they want to put forward, and we see that as a really positive sign. As well, we don't see necessarily the number of the pejorative, of course, unfunded mandates. We don't see nearly the number that we have seen in past legislative sessions. So I think we see a fairly strong policy framework. Of course, we think our remaining challenge really is that budget conversation, which will continue to push significantly.
Great, thanks so much. Comments or questions? Director Morton.
Thanks. So I'm interested in SB 214 as the early literacy strategies outlined in that, and I think it's allocating resources to kindergarten through grade 3 reading initiative account. Where do you see that, and how do you think that's moving forward? Or will it?
Yeah, no, thank you. I do think that some form of 214 will move forward. I think that new Governor Brown has emphasized that early learning really is the priority she wants to see continued from the former governor's administration. I think that was where she wanted to put her emphasis. I think it's likely to be more early learning, pre-K work as well. I think that there is still work to be done in that bill, especially around how we fund any of the K-3, any of the parts that are inside the K-12 initiative, whether that's from state school fund funding, whether that be outside sources, whether that involves CBOs or not involves CBOs. I think that's still a conversation that is amorphous at this point, and to a great degree really tied into the conversation around the OEIB, because obviously they had a big emphasis there. But if you don't have the OEIB, then there are components in that bill that simply don't work anymore because there was heavy emphasis on the OEIB. So I think it's a little bit of the OEIB conversation has to be solved, then they can move on to some of that deeper work on that literacy program. I would suspect it will survive in some form, and hopefully with some additional resources provided. And whether they're to us or to CBOs, really it's about providing that additional resource for literacy.
So I guess my other question is, I mean, you bring up a really good point, is how willing do you feel the legislature is, or even perhaps the major education special interests within Salem? How do you feel these organizations are in terms of their support for thinking outside of the box, particularly when it applies to educating children early to prepare for those pretty rigorous standards in 3rd grade?
That's an interesting question. I've never known them to be afraid of thinking outside the box. I think, of course, the challenge is that most of our education advocacy partners are grounded in the operation of an existing system, and
Which is the definition of not being out of the box, though.
Well, no, not necessarily. I think they're open to. I think that what we see coming out of the ELL working group, I think, shows very much a willingness to thinking outside the box. Strong support for progressive interventions that in the end, if a district completely ignores them, results in the Department of Ed basically coming in and taking control of a district's ELL program. So I don't think they're necessarily afraid of that. I think the challenge, if I could express it for how they might express it, I think the challenge would be in a system where for most districts in the state, they're going to see reductions under a $7.2 billion budget. It's hard to focus on areas outside the box. I think that's the challenge.
Right.
I'm not saying it's the right way or the wrong way. I think that's just the challenge that they approach it with.
Right. Understandable, when they should be focusing on the best outcomes for kids. Yeah.
Director Regan.
Could you talk to us a little bit more about the ramifications of eliminating the achievement compacts or the possibility of eliminating those? What happens in terms of No Child Left Behind, or do we go back to our milestones, or, I mean, what's the discussion?
Thank you, Director Regan. My understanding is there's not implications for the waiver or the waiver specifically. The achievement compacts were simply a reporting mechanism for specific data points. The waiver doesn't, we don't eliminate the need to report on specific data points. It's just the function of the achievement compacts themselves, which maybe just didn't get off the ground the way they were envisioned.
So for us, we would be using our milestones.
We'd probably go back to our milestones, and I've heard
which we
Nancy,
never really went away from anyway.
We didn't. We tried to morph over to use the Achievement Compact, which was way more complicated than what they originally intended to be.
Yes,
and I
that's what I
think
remember.
Nancy's thinking on this has really been, like, it helped us establish statewide milestone framework, and we'll continue to use that as the, for goal setting, but not do that elaborate reporting, because they never figured out how to use that for everything they got. Yeah.
Okay,
so
good. That's helpful.
But and that's not a done deal yet. This is just the conversation at this point. Is that's presumed that will go away.
We're still under the state report card.
Yeah, we still have the state
Different
report
thing.
card. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
One thing that's different.
Exactly.
So,
Right,
there you
still
go.
have that
Good
reporting
riddance to that one.
Yes.
So I guess following along with that, I have one serious question and one snarky one. My serious one is, I was really encouraged around Nancy Golden's in the preliminary recommendation around moving away from summative assessments and high stakes to more formative, and so that was sort of a policy recommendation from staff and partners. So how does that relate to this potential bill? I mean, I'm not sure where that is moving forward.
No, that's fair. I don't think you're going to see much of a move away from summative assessments. First of all, I think that any move to allow districts to test less than 100% by state statute, I think would be viewed very unfavorably by the feds. And I think that is what is putting a lot of people in the position of saying, okay, well, let's test them all but not use the data for any purpose. I'm not saying it, again, I'm not placing a value there. I'm just saying I think that's the dynamic you see. So while I think that a lot of people really believe the value of the formative model and maybe question what is the utility of a summative assessment of 100% testing model, I think that's still, for lack of a better, that's in its formative stages too, but you're certainly not seeing a move away from that. I don't think in any of the legislation we have going forward allows for something less than 100% assessment, of course, except for the opt-out.
Right. I mean, I think if I recall the recommendations, it wasn't around not doing it, but it was around moving away from the sanctions and the labeling of schools as a result. And it felt like a really good philosophical direction based on, of course, what we were saying in our resolution.
Right.
And I was really encouraged to see Nancy Golden bring that up, but it doesn't sound like the bill. I guess we'll see how the bills shake out, and then we'll just need to keep adding our voices.
Well, of course, the sanctioning and labeling is federally mandated. I mean, that's not a state metric. The state expanded it to beyond the Title I schools, but the fact that it exists in its origin is based on No Child Left Behind and then subsequently the waiver, which, on a side note, big news out of the feds this week, the Senate is moving forward and likely to vote on in early May a Senate version of No Child Left Behind, or Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And I think, obviously been very consumed in Salem, reading the updates from the Council of Great City Schools. I think they're looking on that Senate reauthorization as a fairly strong reauthorization and one that they would support. The question, of course, will be, can they reconcile their differences with the House and Congress?
I just want to get to my snarky question,
yes,
too.
Please.
It's just around the amount of time and effort by staff and volunteers, everybody around this Achievement Compact process in our district and across the state. So will we be seeing refunds from the state for that time?
I'll take that to the Ways and Means Committee and see if we can
seriously.
get
before 5, please.
An appropriation, maybe about $250 million.
Yeah,
maybe?
that's incredibly frustrating. I mean, in all seriousness. I mean, that was a huge lift for districts around the state. We had our milestones, and we went through, and then we had a committee of folks.
We had a great committee of folks, actually.
We had a fantastic committee. Yeah. We had staff putting, and that was just one district across, and those across the state who had, anyway, I'll just leave it at that. So, Dr. Knowles.
Well, after I told you I had a question, David just answered my question, which was where were we on the, and I sent him an email earlier today about where are we on the ESEA, which is now known as the Every Child Achieves Act of 2015. So there you go. And so I hope that as we go along, David, you'll just keep filling us in, because a lot of the things that we've talked about here are directly affected by this legislation. And it's, as you know, as we've gone to the council meetings, it's very interesting to see what happens at the federal level and the gridlock there and how that affects all of this. So I'm very pleased that they've moved something. I may not be pleased as they keep going.
Yeah.
Well, and just very briefly on the federal level, I think that we have an interesting, there's pluses and minuses of the current Congress moving anything. The pluses is I think we have a receptive congressional audience to the notion of lightening the testing burden, the heavy sanctioning, the heavy accountability model that we saw in No Child Left Behind. But I think we also have a challenge when it comes to some of the funding provisions like Title I and others, where you have a Congress that may be looking to change that formula to distribute those monies elsewhere, which is why we were happy in the Senate version that is now headed to the floor. It does not contain those funding provisions. But of course the House version did, so we'll see how that one shakes out.
So go fix Congress. Okay.
Just one quick question. What's is that charter bill still around, the one that moves from 80% to 95%?
Yes, thank you, Director Buell. There was a bill, Senate Bill 819, which was heard in the Senate Education Committee, and it would do, as you say, change for all charter schools. The ADM reimbursement rate would be 95%, as well as require pass-through of other additional funds that the district receives that are not passed through currently. Bill had a fairly significant hearing. It is up for a work session tomorrow in Senate Education's final hearing on Senate bills. I would anticipate that the bill is going to be moved to its next committee, which is the Revenue Committee, for further consideration.
What else would we be asked to pass through? Do you have?
The language still needs some interpretation, but essentially any funds that are received on a roughly per student grant type basis will be passed through. Any local revenues that we receive that are not currently passed through would be required to be passed through. Just about every piece, other than say bond proceeds or specific grants like CTE revitalization grants or some of those. But any formulaic per student funds that we receive would be required to pass through, and any local options like the local option levy would be required to pass through.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Director Rao.
2 questions. One is kicker reform. What number are we hoping for the May revenue projection to come in? And I don't know if we're hoping for the kicker to kick because that means revenue is up and they'll find the money, or are we hoping that it comes in just under the kicker kicking so that they have the money they thought and they can allocate it to us?
So the kicker will kick.
Okay.
I don't think there's really any question at this point. It's been an interesting conversation because we changed the kicker a couple of years ago to where you don't actually receive a check anymore if there is a kicker. It's simply a rebate on your tax reform next year. Now, what that does is a couple of things. The biggest being that when the legislature, they do the revenue forecast and they predict how much money they have to spend. Well, the kicker is, of course, for the 13-15 biennium is when the kicker takes place. It's based on that revenue. But as we budget for the 15-17 biennium, the revenue projections include that potential kicker, right? So all of the conversation to date, so the 7.255, et cetera, none of that is at risk if there is a kicker, because the kicker is already built in. You're getting a little bit tautological here, but the kicker's already built into that forecast, right? So if the revenues are up for the 13-15 biennium, it means that kicker is going to be a little bit bigger. But conversely, it also means that the 15-17 biennium revenue will be up by at least an equal amount, if not more. I mean, I guess there is one fluky piece, and that would be if the revenue for the last 2 months of the biennium is really up and revenues for the next biennium are actually down. That's when you would get stuck in a spot where we're actually going to lose money. We did have that once, but it happened much earlier in the biennium, in what was it, 2001, I think, when we had the big $1.2 billion kicker. But that was in December when that was hit. Not in, we're in such a narrow frame left in the biennium that you're not going to have that kind of fiscal impact on the next budget. So I think any up is a victory, and that's what we're looking for, is any up in that revenue forecast.
Thank you. And then I've heard some folks posit the fact that that some legislators might decide to ask voters to repurpose the kicker if it was going to kick, rather than put it as a rebate on their next tax, that perhaps they could use it towards education. Whether or not that, I'm not going to ask you to talk about that. What I want to know is are there any bills that are serious about looking at kicker reform that are currently alive?
I would say we haven't seen a really significant conversation, but I think that will come after that next revenue forecast. When the revenue forecast happens, we know the scope of the kicker, then the conversation will happen, both around what to do with that kicker, if there's any move to bring it back, which, by the way, the legislature can do by a vote of the body. However, it takes a ultra super majority, a 2/3 vote, bigger than a 3/5, so it takes 40 House members, which is a really significant lift, or a constitutional referral. They could retain that kicker with that vote. They can't put that out to the voters. That's the only option there. But then that will also generate the conversation around kicker reform for the future. You know, obviously, we did reform the corporate kicker to where that is retained. So I think that provides the roadmap, if you will, although a heavier lift, but the roadmap is there for looking at some method to retain those funds.
My final question, which isn't, I don't think it's a question. I thought I heard that the 5th-year program bill that was going to end the ability for school districts to retain students who have met the graduation requirements to continue on for a 5th year and enroll in some sort of post-secondary and be paid for that. My understanding is that bill died. It is not moving forward. And so I believe that this board or the next board should begin to seriously investigate whether or not Portland Public is interested in is starting a 5th-year program.
And call the question.
That'd run into it. Yep.
Yeah, it's time to call the question then. Thank you for
If other
mentioning
districts
that.
are doing it, we might as well.
Yeah.
To hear the testimony, I'm sorry to interrupt,
no.
but to hear the testimony from family, they were talking about how strong of a transition a program, you get to hold them, they have established relationships, it was fantastic as a transition for success, which to me made sense because it models after similar to what we're doing at Jefferson Middle College, that to bridge that gap with people. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm not in favor, it's just the fact that it forces, it takes the K, it's the opposite end of Director Buell's earlier question of using pre-K or using K-12 dollars for pre-K. It does the opposite. It uses K-12 dollars to fund post-secondary.
All right. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate all your great work in Salem.
As always, I try to get out timely updates. If you have questions, just shoot me an email. Happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, so finally tonight we will consider the board's business agenda. Ms. Houston, are there any changes?
No.
None? And do I have a motion and a second?
Could I ask for us to pull Resolution 5064 separately?
Hold on just one second. So we have Director Knowles and Director Belisle move to adopt the business agenda. And, okay, Ms. Houston, is there any public comment on the business agenda?
There is not.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Director Regan, you wanted to
So I want to make a motion for us to pull resolution number 5064 on audit committee members and do that separately.
Second. Okay, so, all right, so we are going to have, hold on a second.
See if people can do that.
Yeah. All right, so wait a minute, I'm sorry.
So the next step is who directors and second.
All right, so who, so Director Regan has moved and Director Blau has second, pulling Resolution 5064 from the business agenda. Any discussion of that?
So would we do that discussion now and do that vote separately first? Or
Well, I
do
think
we
they're just
vote
voting on
the
whether
resolution?
we're pulling.
Oh, yeah.
We pull it out.
Yeah.
I would like to give some explanation of who the two community members are, and then I have a clarification that I want to make. So.
Okay, so all in favor of pulling Resolution 5064 from the business agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so why don't we go ahead and have that discussion now on 5064?
Great.
I think we need to finish this one since it's been moved and then it was amended.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, you're right. It's getting really late, I'm getting very tired. Okay, so let's go back to the original business agenda as now amended and go ahead and have a vote on that agenda. All in favor?
Can we have a discussion?
Oh, did we have any
If there's other
discussion?
discussion. I just want to, can I?
Yeah, go
I just
ahead.
wanted to highlight there are some really exciting things moving forward with our summer work on our bonds. That we're doing science classrooms and ADA upgrades at Astor, George, Peninsula, Skyline, Da Vinci, Irvington, Lee, Meek,
Yay.
Gray, Markham, and West Sylvan. And additional science classrooms and ADA upgrades at Mount Tabor, Roseway Heights, Bridger, Harrison Park, Richmond, Lent, and Holiday Center. And I just want to say kudos to our Office of School Modernization because we are on track to meet exactly what we said to the voters, not only our modernizations, but to touch all 63 schools with the work that we promised. So this is really, really exciting, and I'm looking forward to voting yes.
Yay, awesome. All right, so the board will now vote on the business agenda as amended. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the amended business agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0, and our student representative is not here tonight. Okay, so now we will go back to 5064 and have a discussion on that. So
Great. So thank you. So as chair of the audit committee, I just wanted to let the community know that we have identified two community members who are going to be joining the board's audit committee. They are Kari Guy. Kari has worked for the Audit Services Division of the City of Portland's Auditor Office for about 8 or 9 years. She also worked for 10 years as a budget and policy analyst in the Washington State Senate. She has led audits on a whole variety of topics at the city. She has a master's of public administration from University of Washington, bachelor's degree from Stanford, and is a certified government auditing professional, member of the Institute of Internal Auditors and the Association of Local Government Auditors. So she is a professional performance auditor, and so she'll be able to be advising us in this role. Pedro Nunez is a graduate of Linfield College and has a BS in accounting. He's also a certified public accountant, CPA. So he is much more of a financial auditor. He's worked for Polly Rogers and Company, and he's currently with McDonald Jacobs performing financial statement audits, primarily for nonprofits and a couple of charter schools, actually. So those are our two new members of the audit committee. And there's been a little bit of confusion, so I want to clarify that as we bring these two new board members on, that they would be serving in an ex officio role.
Committee members.
Committee members, they would be serving in an ex officio role, so they are advisors to the board committee. So I just want to be clear on that one.
Thank you.
Great.
I have a comment.
Comment?
I'm excited about these two people that we're bringing on board. I think they're going to be great. But I also want to be very clear that in order for us to have these two board members be, or these two committee members to be ex officio, you would have to have that in the committee policy, and that does not appear here. these committee members, these public members who are taking time out of their day to serve on our committee are full voting members, just like the 3 board members who are on the committee. There is nothing in the policy, anywhere in the policy, that sets these 2 people aside different from any committee members. All the way through the policy, it talks about committee members, committee members, committee members. It doesn't talk about board members and ex officio members. It talks about committee members. And frankly, I'm just really surprised that Director Regan would want to make these public members non-voting members of this committee. If it is true that the audit committee is advisory to the board, and for that reason, nothing comes out of the audit committee that the board as a whole does not consider. So if 2 of the audit committee members just took a position with 1 board member, it wouldn't matter unless all of the board agreed with that decision. So again, I can't imagine asking these public members to be ex officio, and legally, they are not ex officio, they are full members under this current policy.
So under the current policy, it's actually silent on that. We have no precedent of board committees with voting public members. They would be advisory and ex officio. So we have a lot of citizen committees in Portland Public Schools, and clearly they have voting authority, but this is a board committee. It's a board committee made up of 3 board members, and the community members would be advisory. So that's the clarification I wanted to make.
Dr. Beal?
It's a board committee. And as a board committee, the board members are, that's it. Now, if that was the way it was appointed, there's a million things where we haven't followed policy since I've been here, and it's fine. But this was appointed as a board committee. It really wasn't appointed as this audit committee that they're talking about anyway. It's a board committee. If you want to reappoint it as the audit committee, then we need to go back and start over and reappoint it with 4 votes as the audit committee, because that committee was not, if you read it's not put forth by the board. It was this is the committee that was put forth by the chair herself, who appoints the people to the committees. And then so this is not the audit committee. This is the chair, this is the board committee that has an audit function, totally different. And it'd be great if it was the audit committee, but you're going to have to go back and start over, because this was a chair committee appointed just like the very similar to the charter committee. We appointed board committees and everybody said fine, this is the committee, everybody said fine. But if you want to do an audit committee and follow this particular part of the policy, I mean, we fudged on them all, then we need to go back and appoint a board committee, and then make it clear. We need to change the policy in the resolution that allows you to specify there's voting. Then we need to go back and make the committee. We got all these steps we need to do. I'd say it's crazy. You have a board committee, you have 3 members of the committee, and they vote on the board committee, same as the charter committee. They didn't include anybody in the charter committee.
Well, we would have to go back and change our existing policy.
We'd have to go back and start over.
But we haven't changed that, and I think...
I just want to clarify.
So actually, Director Buell, if you just look at the policy, 1.60.040, it does establish the audit committee, and it does establish the process for appointing members to that committee.
Exactly,
and
which we didn't
excuse
follow.
me, I'm not finished speaking.
We didn't follow that.
We did follow it. And these people, and there is, I mean, it's a legal precedent that if the wording isn't included in the legislation or the statute, you can't add a word to a statute. You can't add a word to a policy.
But it's a board
You cannot
committee.
add a word to a policy.
Every
It's
board
not
committee
legal.
has 3 board members.
Well, you're correct that it's not, but that's not what we did. We appointed a board committee, which is the audit committee, not the audit committee, which has 5 members. And you can look at it to begin with, because if you were going to appoint it as an audit committee with 5 members, you would have appointed Bobby Regan, me, you, and 2 more people, so you had the 5 members.
Which is exactly what we're doing right now.
No, you would have done that at the start.
We've been waiting for it all year, exactly.
With the 2 people to be put forward as the committee. It's not the policy committee.
the board chairs appointed Director Regan as the chair of this committee in September, and you and I on the committee.
Exactly.
We've been waiting since September to get the rest of this committee together.
Exactly.
Right, which we're really
Exactly,
excited that
which
we're
we're doing
So-
right here tonight.
And that's not
But
the
that's
policy.
not the committee that's referred to in the policy. This is,
Of course it
this, no, it's not, the committee that's referred to
Do
in
you
the
guys need
policy.
do you need to do a legal opinion here on this one?
No.
We already
Did you
had
get
a
one?
legal opinion.
No,
Director
it's
Blau
clear
has
as
been
a
waiting
bell.
for a while
You
for
don't
weigh in
need
on
to-
this.
So I looked back at, there's board policy 1.60.040, which Director Knowles references. And I haven't taken time off my screen to go look at that one. But I looked at policy 1.20.014 as you all were discussing this. In paragraph 7 of that, it says a board committee may appoint, subject to a board approval, advisory members from the student body or community to further obtain internal and external stakeholder input. At the time of appointment, the board will determine the length of term or sunset point of the committee, additional membership qualifications or makeup and meetup schedule. Advisory members will be instructed in the committee's roles, functions, and reporting relationships in communication with the board, administration, and staff. These members may not be included in considering whether a quorum of the board, or excuse me, of the committee is present, nor may they vote on recommendations to be made to the board. However, either an advisory member or an ex officio member may present a written minority report to the board. A board committee may request that the superintendent appoint staff to participate as non-voting committee members. So,
Nice going. That's good.
So there is that. Yeah,
There
so
is a
my
bill.
understanding,
Thank you.
notwithstanding that, is that I thought the audit had a special status as the audit committee under that policy that you just cited, that it was a special case. However, the main point that we want to accomplish tonight is welcoming and appointing these two good folks as volunteers to this committee. So, you know, whether or not, either way, whatever recommendations or votes or reports or anything comes from this committee, which I really hope we will see very soon, it's the full board that has the authority to decide on what the topics are going to be.
Eventually, yes, of
Yeah,
course.
so I mean, it looks like we need to go back and get clarification and folks moving forward, and
Well, I think
we're almost at the end of the school year at this
I think
point.
we
so-
have clarification.
We did have clarification from Ms. Patterson, our general counsel, who said the same thing that I just said.
Yeah.
But that's not,
on the other stuff
but
tonight.
that's not consistent with.
But this is
actual
Because
policy.
it's a special
separate committee.
policy
It has its
around
own-
the audit committee, because my recollection in years past is the audit committee was always unique among board committees and having these community members sit on it.
Well, I
So-
think when
May I
we
add-
actually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Director Morton?
You can finish your thought, Bobby.
We used to have a board finance, audit, and operations committee, and the
Right.
audit committee was a part of that. So
Right.
it was the board members. So, I mean.
But no, they're outside
Right,
folks,
they weren't
too.
voting.
Separate.
It was the board audit, it was the 3 board members who were the voting members.
So clearly, this is a topic we're going to need to keep discussing, but for right now, let's go ahead and vote on Resolution 5064, which is
It's
appointing...
helpful to know whether or not they're going to be voting or not. So, I mean, I could do an amendment and just add them in there as ex officios. So why don't I do that? So I would like to offer an amendment that would indicate that the 2 public members would be serving as ex officios.
You can't amend the policy without going through the public process.
This isn't the policy.
This is just.
I'll second.
Well, you can't change the policy without going through the
Okay,
public
so-
process.
It's not being changed.
So Director Regan has moved and Director Curler has seconded an amendment to Resolution 5064 that would be...
So there's 2 places it would be. In the second sentence, it says the audit committee will be comprised of 3 members of the school board and 2 ex officio public members. And then in B, it would say the audit committee recommends the board appoint Kari Guy and Pedro Nunez as ex officio members.
Okay, so discussion.
And actually, it would be under Resolution 1, but that is consistent with the policy.
Discussion?
I think I guess the reason I second it is because the issue needs clarity.
Excuse me.
And this gives it clarity. And it certainly defines the role of the members, the public members on that board committee, which is to advise and get input. So I think it makes sense. I vote for it.
Director Morton?
So, first, I guess I have 2 statements. The first one is I'm not right now clear enough to be able to to vote in the affirmative on an issue. And this is, you know, perhaps I'll take ownership of what I've heard are a couple of conflicting things. Particularly what I'm concerned about is downgrading the voice of community members who volunteer for committees. I'm concerned about that without the clarity of saying here's the position. You know, I've listened to what Greg read. I've listened to what Pam has read. I still feel like there's a lack of clarity for me to be able to say, well, sure, this is definitive. We should have policies that create a definitive opportunity. So that's the first thing. The second thing to me is, as a board member who will be voting on recommendations brought forward to the full board from the audit committee, I'll put this expectation out there right now that I'm looking for consensus from the audit committee. I'm looking for an audit committee that says we were thoughtful, we were intentional, we brought up topics that were important, we feel like are important to this district, and we're recommending these to the board. Okay. Again, can we achieve consensus in this process if we have a power differential between board members and community members? I'm not entirely sure that's possible. Finally, all of it's coming back to the board anyway, so I don't know why there would be a need to create that downgrade or that power differential within the committee. If that's where the policy sits, then I would say, okay, the policy sits that, we're bound by that policy. But again, I don't have the clarity that offers us that ability right now. So I'm comfortable right now with that vote. And again, I'll take ownership of not being clear about my own understanding of the at least the couple of policies and parameters that have been read tonight.
Okay, Director Ball.
I mean, there are two things that I can make sense of, but I would appreciate clarity and understanding both past practice and a little bit of clarity. So I'm not sure that we all make our best decisions at 9:30 after a full day. So at this point, I feel like I would have to vote no on any of this just until I have that clarity, because I wouldn't want to move forward one way or another. That being said, and it doesn't have to be seconded, but I would like to move to table this until next week so that we can work on the clarity that we need.
I'll second.
I don't think you can. So hold on one second, just a process question in terms of, I mean, we have been waiting since September for this committee to do its work, so can that committee begin to meet if we haven't officially voted on the resolution?
We actually have been meeting already.
With the new members?
We have been meeting with the new members.
Fantastic.
And so at this point, they wouldn't be voting members.
They're voting members.
But, I mean, ultimately, it's just voting on at this point, it would be voting on a recommendation to the board who would actually have the authority to vote on what the topics are going to be. So the audit committee is not going to be voting on, it's just forwarding a recommendation. So I don't think it's, I mean, to me, part of the function and the value of having those external experts serve on the committee is sort of supplementary to hiring an independent performance auditor, that you have that external voice. And clearly, you know,
I'm thrilled to have them on board.
Right.
In
So
advisory role.
I think without having
really helpful.
as long as we're not delaying any further the work of this committee and bringing forth actually getting some audits done, I would be okay with waiting until we get the clarity. My understanding, and again, I'll take ownership too, that maybe I was unclear on it or misinterpreting it. My understanding was always that those folks that we would be seeking out last fall would be full voting members. But again, the authority rests ultimately with the board. Any board committee, in a sense, is just advisory to the full board. They're studying it in depth and bringing it forward. So anyway,
Is this a board committee? Are you calling this a board committee? Because if it's a board committee, I don't want other people voting who haven't been elected on a committee that I'm an elected body member of. In 1980, they tried to run the school board with a person from the community as the chairperson. and I refuse to come because we are the elected members of the school board. If this is a committee set together that's a board committee, then those are the only people that have the responsibility to vote, I don't even think we need this personally. That's just the way it is. I don't want those people
So that's
voting who are
covered,
some.
that's covered under
Yeah.
the board committee policy that Director Blau read.
Right,
But with the
exactly.
policy around the district performance auditor is a different policy and a different
Well,
committee
then
than
we need to
Director
make
Knowles.
it, what I'm saying is then we need to redo it and make a different committee, make it a different committee. And I
It
certainly
is.
would not be a member of a committee where I'm an equal voting member. That's a board committee that someone else who hasn't been elected is an equal voting member with me. I'm sorry, it's not a downgrade or an upgrade. It's basically almost an illegal grade. You don't
Okay.
bring people in, set them on the school board and say, okay,
So
you're a
Director
voting
Belisle,
member,
what I'm
which is what we
hearing
would be
from
doing.
you is that given that we have this separate policy in existence that names an audit committee as a separate piece.
Exactly, but then we need to
What you're saying is
clarify
that in
that.
your view, you would prefer to clarify that, but that's a separate process versus moving forward with this committee. But Director Knowles.
No,
So I
that's not
just
exactly
wanted-
what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that that committee is
Mm-hmm.
not the one that they're talking about. If you're going to say, it doesn't say they're voting members on there, it says they're members of the committee.
Right.
But if you're going to make it a board committee with board members, and it's a board committee, those people are not elected members of the board, they don't have a vote. So it doesn't take
But-
Director Regan's change.
I
It
understand
takes-
that.
In order to fix that, it takes a change by us to vote separately, in which case I would then resign from the audit committee because that's not how this, just like if we had Superintendent Smith vote with us as the board. Now we have 8 voting members.
So Director
That's
Bill, what I'm
that's
saying in
incorrect. That's not how it
response
works.
is that we do have this existing policy under the district performance auditor policy that names specific, it outlines the functioning of an audit committee.
But it doesn't say they
separate-
vote. It doesn't say they vote. It just
Yes, it
says they're
does.
members of the
It
committee.
does say they vote.
It
Within
says
the-
they vote?
It does say
Read
they vote.
where it says that votes
It says
there.
committee members vote.
Where does it say that?
And I wanted, Director Buell, I would suggest that you read the policy, because the things that you're saying are not true, and they're
It's
not in the
not true
policy.
that we have,
The audit
people
committee
in
is
the-
the audit committee.
Not
It is
true.
not a board committee, it's the audit committee. It's made up of 3 board members and 2 public members. With regard to the policy that Director Belisle read, I'd say you just have to look at subsection 1 where it says special board committees. The audit committee is not a special board committee. It's the audit committee.
That's a special
Period.
board committee.
I'm confused on what
Right.
it is, and so that's why I'm asking.
I call a question and we
Yeah,
can
we
vote
need,
on it.
thank you, yes.
Director What are we voting?
So we're voting on the amendment to Resolution 5064, which would add ex officio in front of the public members under A, B, and resolved.
That's not to table.
No, we voted to table.
No, we didn't.
Well, what's on the table
was
right
no-
now is.
Excuse me, we didn't vote, but
Right.
Director,
That's what's on.
that's what's on the floor at the moment.
I made a motion.
Nobody seconded.
I did. I seconded it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so wait a minute, so we need to vote on your.
You can't have 2 on the floor
Yeah,
at
we
once.
already had Director Regan's, so let's go ahead and vote on Director Regan's, and then we can vote on Director
Vote the table
Belisle's.
first.
I don't think so.
Have to vote a table first.
Yeah.
Vote in
I
table?
don't think you can have 2 motions on the floor at the same time. That's my recollection.
A vote to table would always
Remember
be a
that?
second motion on the
Do you
floor.
remember that?
Yes, and I think there are 1 or 2 that allow for 2 of them to happen, and 1 of them would be to table, but I'm not positive of that, so.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and, so the motion to table the resolution has been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that, or are we just calling the question and taking a vote? I guess I would ask, I still am not clear from staff, I just want to make, or the committee, to make sure that this committee can continue to do its work.
Yes.
If we were to table this resolution.
Yes.
As long as we don't have, right now, they're voting members.
Right.
They'll continue to be voting members until the
We won't
language
vote.
They're not
changes.
voting members
They're
because
voting
we
on everything.
haven't appointed them.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We won't be able to have any votes because they haven't
We
been
have 3 of us, we
elected
can
to the
vote.
committee yet.
So we have 3
How
out
about
of
you just
5.
bring a recommendation to us without voting on it, and
Right.
then we can avoid this whole issue. The
There
point
you
is,
go.
we need to move forward to doing some
Agreed.
audits.
Right.
So,
Agreed.
Since
okay,
September.
And we actually have a meeting on Thursday, so.
that's great. Okay, so let's go ahead and vote on tabling this resolution. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please indicate by saying no.
No.
No. Okay, so the resolution, excuse me, the motion to table the resolution passes, so the resolution is tabled. And that was a vote of 5-2. Okay.
And just to be clear, we are thrilled to have 2 new advisory board members. And we're thrilled that they have the advisory, and we are thrilled that they have a professional auditing background. It's going to be a huge boost to us as a board and as a committee. So all we're looking at is a clarification on whether they're voting members or non-voting members. But either way, they're awesome. They're going to be awesome additions to the committee.
I look forward to hearing the recommendations from the full audit committee and moving forward, so thank you. All right, so, okay. So, just a couple reminders before we wrap up that we still have 2 town hall meetings for the public to share budget priorities with the board. So tomorrow night, April 21st, 6 o'clock at Franklin High School. And then on Monday, April 27th, 6 o'clock at Roosevelt. And the meeting at Roosevelt on the 27th, Spanish will be the primary language. And other than that, we'll now wrap up after having noted that the next meeting of the board will be held on Tuesday, April 28th. This meeting is adjourned.